questions on. I don't know if you have anything you want
Oh,
to elaborate on.
yeah. Also, things to avoid.
Well,
Yeah, as well.
politics.
Fair.
That was a given.
That's really it. It's not really a, if it's like completely off-topic questions, depending on like if it somewhat relates to Warglaive, that's fine. Other than that, just I'll trust you guys to make the right judgment of what questions are right to ask. All right, so the stream's live. Hello everybody. My name is Alec Asmagun. I won't say my last name. I tend to leave that one out. But I am the CEO of Scarlet Games and CEO, Chief of Operations, Creative Director, Head Writer, and Head 3D Artist for the miniatures. I wear all the hats. And I welcome you all to the second Warglaive Gothic live Q&A. So how we're going to run this time around, as I just finished explaining to the two essential hosts of the Q&A, both Nathan and Tangular are going to be running the chat. They are going to be hand-picking out questions, either questions that they themselves have or that you guys in the community have that they feel are most accurate to ask me. I think it's more fun to allow them to kind of operate as the arbiters of the questions, because they represent you guys, the community, that will be the potential clientele for me to develop everything for. So I think, and plus it's a little bit more fun for me to feel like I'm being interviewed almost. So the only exception I'll grab from the chat myself is super chats, but other than that, I'm gonna let them run the show. So go ahead. Just roll.
I was gonna say, do you not want to welcome a few people in the chat first? Obviously, make them feel nice and comfortable, ready for.
Welcome, Gavin, of course. Wonderful to have Gavin join us. Urus Osium, welcome. Magnus the Not Red. I apologize in advance, by the way, for any dog. We have a puppy in the house, and for some reason, my dog doesn't like her. Sorry, doesn't like him. She doesn't like him. So if that happens, if you guys hear these loud barks all of a sudden, it's just because he's trying to play with her toys.
Okay, that's fair enough. I mean, if we want to do that, I can keep an eye on chat. If any more people join in, I'll just say hi from all of us, just so no one's missed, and then we'll just keep on chugging as it is.
Oh, yeah?
Also, hello, Forlorn. Popped in chat.
Forlorn being a new person.
Indeed.
Actually.
Newer.
Yep.
Because I was going to grab that first one from Uros. Apparently he couldn't ask it in the previous streams.
Remember, you guys are relaying to me the questions.
Oh.
So let's see the first one then. Uros asked, you said the Wraithen grow as they age. So can one manage to live forever or grow without stop? I mean, is it possible?
It is possible as far as the Wrathen and anyone in the galaxy knows. Rith being the oldest amongst their species, there's actually quite a few legends about him across pretty much every core species in the galaxy. The Warborn have great tales of supposedly when this small, young runt of a Wrathen amongst a clan of a different name and of a different colored hue savagely captured and enslaved so many souls and poor individuals, and then one day grew into what they now know as Rith. And there's also, him being the only example that everyone has, because most of the time Wrathen's lifespan is defined on how long in their own clans they live, based on who kills them. Half the time, if there's a power struggle, that's how most of them meet their end. Another half is when they get engaged in raids. But potentially, as far as the galaxy knows, and as far as the Wrathen themselves know, there is no limit on their lifespan. There is no physical degradation they receive from age. They can get sick, they can be ill, they can be poisoned, but in terms of actual effects of like the calcium in their bones eventually degrading or their musculature softening over time, all of that has not been seen or displayed. So it's actually one of the things that makes them even more terrifying to the general galaxy, is the idea that if a Rathan is allowed to, it can cultivate into an everlasting creature, an everlasting nightmare that they can never deal with. So
So basically, from what I understand, their only limit to the size, if they're not killed, is pretty much laws of physics.
yeah.
Okay, so. Okay, so would you like to take the next one, Nathan, or should I go?
Yes, it should be the one that Gavin Isaacs had followed up with, saying, who is the most centralized faction within the Warglaive?
So when you so just a clarification question
Like,
to that.
are
When
some
you
of the nations overextended or spread out?
Okay, so
the
more like
extent of it?
most prevalent, like physically in the galaxy. In terms of territory, technically, the Rathan, based on the fact that they don't really have a defined border or defined realm that they operate out of, the Rathan tend, like I said in the previous Q&A, they tend to be in everyone's territory at the same time. And if they're not trading and bartering goods, slaves, technology that they've raided, or they're usually typically raiding or attacking people. It's one of the two. But if we're actually talking about a solidly maintained and established borders with a maintained faction, I'd say probably the largest would be the Gretsch. The Gretsch have the largest chunk of space. In fact, they actually have, in terms of their territory, it kind of stretches around two of the other factions, the Volk and the Sovereignty. And they are a pain in the ass to deal with for most of the factions. But they, yeah, just the simple answer to the question is, I tend to suffer with simplifying my answers, because I want to give you guys details. But, yeah, the Gretsch have the largest territory.
Okay.
Banjo, do you want to follow up with
I'm gonna ask Magnus the Not Red ask the question, but I'm gonna kind of think what he tried to say. So he says a Death Corps type unit's coming. So from what I understand, I think his question is there any sort of fanatical army that is dedicated on winning at all costs and doesn't disregard their own survival or well-being, maybe?
Well, the Jackals of the Sovereignty are, with their conditioning and training for war, they are taught that the Sovereignty is above everything, the Crypta are above everything, and that they are the clawed arm of this. They are the claws and fangs of the Sovereignty as a whole. And it's beaten into them that their lives are insignificant and unimportant in comparison to that of the greater Sovereignty. So after that extensive training, though they still maintain, like, you know, they're not as, I wouldn't say personality-wise, they're not like Krieg in a lot of ways. The fanatical obsession and willingness to die in battle without fear is a good way to describe the Jackals. But they still also maintain a lot of their humanity, or I guess in this case, cryptanity. Their personality, they still have personality, they still feel emotion, they do feel fear, but they're so honed and, in a way, brainwashed after their conditioning for war, that they truly value the Sovereignty and the wider Crypta society more than themselves. So they will charge into battle with their bayonets charged, and will gladly die for the Sovereignty. Because a huge part of their conditioning and the Helsings is a part of it that's beaten into them so hard is that they are tools bred for war. They are there as a tool. They will not be seen as living beings once they put on that armor and they make their vows as warriors. So
Okay. Yeah. Just before we continue, Magnus the Not Red kind of specified. He was asking about Death Corps aesthetics or tactics. So gas masks and siege warfare. Is there anything like that?
Yes. There's quite a bit of siege warfare with, in terms of alien factions. The Gretsch have a little bit of that, but I get that I'm getting the hint that this is more about the aesthetic. Again,
Yeah.
that's probably the Jekylls. Though they don't have gas masks, and their aesthetic is only similar in certain aspects. Both are inspired by World War I aesthetics. Again, Jekylls is probably the closest to that. It's not. It doesn't fit the same niche exactly, but that's the closest I can offer.
Okay. So moving on, Nathan.
Another question from Gavin, who says, are there any elite style armies, such as, rather than fighting in full squads of 10 or about 5, are there any armies out there that may deploy like 3 units at a time, but it's only 3 units because these guys are vastly stronger? Like,
Yes.
bigger units, but fewer units. If that makes sense.
Yes, there are. I'm not going to go into a full lore spiel about them, but amongst that, the Warborn as a faction as a whole aren't a really heavy in the numbers faction. All of their armies that I'm conceptualizing at the moment, even them separate from one another, are all to a degree elite armies. Each one of them would feel like a named character in any of the other factions in terms of their strength and their ferocity. In terms of outside of their faction, the Terran Republic has their mech sub-faction, which has the same feel. It's quality over quantity with them as well. Each mech is intended anyway, at this point, conceptually speaking, is intended to be a heavy hitter on the tabletop. Something that's going to have very good stats, but is also going to cost a lot in army loadout. As for Sovereignty, same deal. There is a third army for the Sovereignty I'm working on at the moment. I'm not going to give you their name exactly. I'll wait to reveal that later. It's still a little workshopped in some of the fluff of it, but there will be also like that for the Sovereignty. As for the alien factions, with the exception of the Rathan, pretty much the Volk are more of a medium force army. They're not really elite. They have elites, of course, to employ in battle, but they're not their own sub-faction. But in terms of army load, I intend to make it so when you customize your own layout for, let's say, the Volk, you can choose to make your army an elite army by just packing it in with their more tougher units. But they do benefit with having, in terms of how I envision them on the tabletop, they work better with a combination of their medium, tougher units mixed in with some of the elite units. The only other army that really has no elites at the moment, even in conceptualization, well, they've heavy HQs and stronger artillery units and some stronger, beefier guys, but I wouldn't necessarily call them an elite force. The Gretsch have something like that, but they'd probably be the hardest army, especially where I'm at right now, to customize as an elite force, because it would be a very ineffective playstyle. I hope that answers the question.
Sounds decent enough. Okay, so I'm gonna kind of combine the next 2 questions from Gavin Isaacs and from Brother Dr. Kaukyo, because they're, I think, on the same subject. So Gavin asks about the Gretsch fighting style, and Kaukyo asked about the which faction besides the Wraithen has the most unorthodox military structure. So maybe if you want to say something about the Gretsch, and then if there's anyone else who has a more trained, not the usual like army structure and tactics, or something that is a bit different then.
So, can you repeat it one more time, just so I'm sure I'm understanding?
Okay, so the wider question is if any faction has most unorthodox military structure besides the Wraithen, and in specific, you can just say something about the Gretsch fighting style, if they are the same or if they are different, or if they are Orthodox or not.
The Gretsch are they're organized in a different way. It's hard to explain. Also, when I'm trying to be vague with them, the Gretsch are the best, other than the Rathan, to describe as disorganized. The Warborn are a little bit. They do have the Warborn have a hierarchy for sure, but they also, each individual Warborn seek personal glory, so it's not like they're regimented and that they're properly... what keeps them in line is respect for the warriors at the head of each of their force, but if they lose respect for them, they'll gladly kill them. So, from a lore standpoint, the Warborn are, in a way, fairly disorganized. But in another sense, they are actually very organized. As for the Gretsch are... From our more human standpoint of what we would consider organized or disorganized, they are incredibly disorganized, random, and unpredictable. For them, they are incredibly predictable, and they go by their idea of the books for rules of how they engage in fighting.
That's fair. Okay, so moving on. Nathan?
Zoid Industries actually joined us in the stream.
Welcome, Zoid.
Oh, wait, yeah, welcome.
And just to recap for anybody who's just joining right now, I'm intentionally not looking at the chat right now because I want the community to kind of run this Q&A. So Nathan and Tangular, as representatives of you guys, are going to be not only providing their own commentary, their own questions from their own heads, but also picking questions from the chat. The only exception to this is I'll directly respond to super chats and things like that, but otherwise I'm letting them run the show as they represent you guys as the community, and I feel like it's more appropriate to allow them to operate the questioning.
And also as another quick reminder, I'm not sure if you have the link on hand with you, Asmogon, but just for anyone unaware, the merch store is actually up and running. If you'd like to support the show and Asmogon, his pretty self.
Yeah, I can share that real quick. Yeah, I do. There is a merch store for t-shirts and some other apparel. There's a Vampire Empress waifu pillow, poster, and blanket. That's also available. Yeah, feel free to check out the merch store if you guys are interested. If not, that's perfectly fine. But yeah, if anyone interested.
Okay.
No miniatures are up, by the way. I do need to clarify. It is just like apparel. So.
Okay, just before we move in, because I don't want him to feel left out. Hello, Kaukyo. Because I kind of missed him as well.
Oh, hey, Kaukyo.
Okay, so we can move
on. I was clarifying with Forlorn in the chat, as you can see, as to what he meant, but he said, in terms of the tabletop, how tall are the base units or the troop models going to be?
Like
measurement-wise.
Okay, so like miniature scaling?
Mm-hmm, yeah. How tall are they going to be?
They're going to vary. The more...
He said base units, so I'd imagine your, like, standard units. I'm not very tabletop-esque with jargon, but...
Well, I'm even then, there's going to be a variety based on faction. Both the Terran, well, more so the Terran Republic, as they represent the base humans, and at the smallest, their base infantry, I envision to be around the same size as Guardsmen, with like a 25mm base. Or, is it 25 or 30? Sorry, I don't know the exact measurements off the top of my head of like the base sizes, but 25mm or 30mm base. That's how I envision how big they're going to be. And at the very biggest for any of the factions, I'd say something along the same size as like a Stompa for 40k, or an Imperial Knight would be comparable to like their biggest unit on the tabletop. But yeah, there's going to be a bunch of sizes all over the place, so to give you a specific idea, it would be complicated. It's faction to faction, and even then, I don't know the exact sizes as of right now.
Still working on it, so.
Yeah.
Ah, fair. Okay, so next question from Urosocium. He's asking about are there any minor factions which you might want to explore or actually describe?
So in
Do
terms
you
of
have any? Yeah,
minor factions, I guess I'll need clarification on what is considered a minor faction.
well, like mercenaries, auxiliaries, maybe something that can be added to other armies, like the assassins in the Warhammer,
Okay,
something like that.
so
I
like
believe.
subsidized units.
Either that or any minor factions in lore, maybe.
There
If you want
won't be anything like that out for first edition, I don't think. I do have a mercenary faction for the human factions, in particular. Uh, they're basically space pirates. They're a combination of each of the 3 human factions, and ironically, they're the only group that have actually reunified under one banner. And even then, they're pirates. Like the Wrathen, they're all kind of all over the place. No two ships are going to be aligned under the same banner. They will be. I also want to try a cool idea, but I don't. Actually, I'm not gonna say that because if I end up scrapping it after some prototyping, I don't want anybody to say, "Hey, well, this idea is like it might fall through." So I'll hold off on sharing that. But what I will say is there is intended to be subsidized allies to throw into armies. There is an intention for that. I just don't think I'll have those ready for first edition.
Okay,
Nice.
that's fine. Also,
Um,
hello Dragonis, before we miss him.
Mm-hmm.
Hello,
She's
Dragonis.
back. Question from Gavin Isaacs again. I would say Gavin's very on the ball with his questions. He asks, how does naval combat work in the Grimdark, such as weapons and styles of fighting?
So
It can either be in general or for each faction. I think for the sake
Are-
of time, it's
are we
probably
talking
going to be in general
tabletop?
explanation.
Are we talking tabletop or are we talking lore? Because in terms of tabletop, I'm hoping to make a secondary game, like a Gothic Armada kind of thing. I am intending to work on that, but as I want to get the war game out before that, that'll probably be much further down the line. I'm not even really conceptualizing that properly right now. But in terms of the lore, I can go into the lore.
He's already got spin-offs planned.
I have a bunch of things planned, but I want to get the first part of the plan done first before you break
lore.
into the other ones. Lore, okay.
He says law.
Generally, most of the factions... God, how to simplify this? Most of the all factions have space travel. This is concrete. Some are faster, some have more efficient ways of travel. All of them travel using what's called the slipstream. Well, typically it's jokingly referred to, especially in the Terran Republic and amongst the Warborn, in their own ways, as slingshotting. The reason it's referred to that is it's a slipstream jump. What it is they engage their engines and create a field, the wording, I have it in my notes, but I don't have it in front of me. They create a energy field of some kind. I have a name for the type of energy in the field name on my notes, but they're not in front of me. So they create a field around their ship, and it kind of distorts the ship in space-time, and for a brief second, it completely phases out of molecular sync with the rest of matter. And in that brief second, it launches forward using the energy in the field. And in that moment, it's comparable to teleporting, but they are traveling through matter as just kind of desynced matter. So let's say they go through a sun, their molecules are still separated, but they're still there. They're still in a sense physical. So they can be affected traveling through certain radiations, certain fields, certain energies. And once they jump, and assuming that they hit nothing in between them and their destination, they can disengage it at any time. Typically, they set, like... most factions do this. Typically, they'll set, like, a certain level of the field that they're to create for the jump. But they have no way of... knowing exactly where they'll end up. They just... They point in a general direction, and they can calculate, for example, the Sovereignty, and the Terran Republic, and the Warborn all have ways to more or less predict where they'll end up. But they could be a couple hundred light years ahead of where they intended to be. They could be a hundred light years behind where they intended to be. They can only get the general location. So that's why it's kind of the visual of slingshotting. Like, this is where I want to aim, but it's not an exact science. And this slipstream jump, once they make it to the other side, typically they feel, everyone feels like they've lurched forward. The only people who have an exact science, out of all the factions, to exactly predict where they'll end up to a pinpoint accuracy, is the Volk. And there are two factions who do not use slipstream drives: the Rathan and the Gretsch. The Rathan, because their ships are a bunch of scrapped together junk heaps, and if they do employ a slipstream drive, it's typically less accurate than any other faction. Like, we're talking, it's a coin flip of whether they actually create a successful field, or they blow themselves up. More often than not, it's the former. So the smarter raid barges won't even bother. They're just like, I'll take the slow, steady path. But that's the current technology that most factions employ. There is a couple variations on the slipstream drive depending on faction. But more or less, that's like the general tech that's used by all the factions.
So I think that's fair enough for now. So next question from Brother Dr. Kaukil. He asks, what faction is best for going full Mongol? So, from what I understand, basically just go screaming into battle and destroy everything in their path.
Warborn.
Okay.
I think he might also mean the aesthetics as well, like I described in the chat, like the warriors of the steppe. As if it, like the White Scars aesthetic as well.
Oh, White Scars aesthetic. The Warborn have a little bit of that, but majorly they're mostly influenced by Norse culture and Norse mythology. There is some minor influence by Mongolian culture, though, in theirs. So, minor bits of that there. But if you're looking for, like, the perfectly exact same feel and style as, like, that Mongolian warrior charging into battle on horseback or bikes or whatever, unfortunately, I don't have anything as of yet in the lore that's like that.
Okay.
There are speedster factions that I like to write in, but that wouldn't be them.
Okay then, moving on.
I was gonna hop into it, and a very good because you might. I'm gonna be jotting down some of the more previous questions, but I do want to jump to something that Gavin Isaacs has just asked that I'm actually very interested to see. What factions are the most hostile to each other? Like, who was the most savage rivalry?
The most savage rivalry out of... I'll kind of break this into two brackets. Human on human and Xenos on human. Actually, 3 brackets, and Xenos on Xenos. So human on human, the most savage rivalry is between the Sovereignty and the Warborn. Their cultures are virtually exact opposites. Their mindsets are almost exact opposites. The Sovereignty is very much... The soldiers are bred and produced for war to serve the wider sovereignty. They are tools for war. For the Warborn, they don't see war as something that they send others to do. Each of them are their own warrior. They see war as an opportunity to prove themselves to their gods and to prove themselves just to their own houses and their own families that they are mighty warriors, and if they die in the process, then that was the end result that would have always happened. The way both factions look at war and the way they think about the fighting and what a warrior is completely opposite. So despite mindset being completely opposite, there's also, like I said, culture. The sovereignty are more proper, structured, hierarchical. They have nobility, and they typically don't like being dirty and in the mud and mucking about with those they see as lesser. The Warborn, they don't give a fuck. They are fighters, they are killers, they are warriors. And they also like to enjoy life. They're jubilant. If they get into a fight, they're enjoying the fight. If they are in a crisis, then crack some jokes with your boys, grab some of the nearest mead, down it, and let's just have a party, and fuck it. They, again, just the exact opposite cultures, and the fact that there's a certain thing that happens during the reunification war that really established why they don't like each other. I won't go into that, but there's... As much as the Terran Republic was still involved in that whole process, the Sovereignty don't really care as much about their involvement as they do the Warborn's direct involvement. And likewise the other way around for the Warborn for the Sovereignty. They have a vicious rivalry. I'll just leave it at that. As for human to Xenos, all the human factions hate the Rathan. With a burning passion. The Rathan have been raiding, attacking, and reaving the human factions since they first arrived in the galaxy. The Terran Republic in particular. But they've attacked the Warborn, they've attacked the Sovereignty, they have been a never-ending, never-ceasing cyst on their ass. And they hate their fucking guts. As for Xenos and Xenos... They also hate the Rathan, but I'd say the Volk and the Gretsch hate each other far more than they hate the Rathan. The Gretsch really don't feel one way or another about it, but the Volk hate the Gretsch. They despise them. They are the only other faction that they just simply do not understand. Now, the Volk believe they understand humans in all our forms, pretty much through and through, but the Gretsch are an enigma to them. The way they operate, the way they fight, the way their culture is operated, the way their goals.
Resources acquired.
Everything is just so confusing to the Volk, and not to mention what the Gretsch have done to try and conquer part of Volk space. They hate each other viciously. And this is a super chat. I'm going to grab this. Gavin Isaac, thank you so much. Thank you. Do any faction use, like, living weapons or beasts of war, or a more living-based tech for the faction? So, I guess, like, if I understand that correctly, like, bioweapons? Because if you mean, like, using animals or pets, the Rathan do that. Like, they capture and poach creatures on planets and train them to be war dogs, essentially. But if we're talking more as in, like, using bioweapons, that would be the Gretsch. I would elaborate, but I don't want to spoil that too much. I like leaving the Gretsch a little bit more of an enigma.
Okay, is it okay if I grab the next question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, well, it was asked by our very good German friend Dragonis, who asks, in the universe, who is the biggest military threat? Like, I'd imagine that's organized military, like the Imperium, as organized as you'd want to call them. Like, Imperium scale, who's most like them, would you say?
Well,
And why it is the Rathan?
What?
And why it is the Rathan?
And why does the if I understand the question correctly, like, which is, like, the largest military, roughly, is the question?
Yeah, I'd imagine that'd be it.
Because in terms of human factions, that have to be the sovereignty, technically speaking. The Terran Republic are virtually the same size, but there is a slight discrepancy with their territory. The sovereignty got an early start by comparison to the other two factions in terms of spreading their territory, and they were less careful about it. So technically, they have a larger portion of the galaxy conquered by comparison to the Terran Republic, but in terms of like actual military size, they're about the same. It's a slight discrepancy. But if we're talking like out of every faction, it'd have to be the Gretsch. They are the most prolific out of the factions, and given their territory size, as well as their consistent hounding of anyone at the edge of their space, as they continue to slowly expand it, yeah, I'd say they probably have the largest military overall. It's not organized, at least again by our understanding of organized. It's not hierarchical, at least not in the same way. It's weird to explain.
Yeah, Dragonis made a bit of a addition to the question. What is the largest, most powerful faction of all of them? That's what he meant.
The Gretsch.
Gretsch, there. Okay. So, moving on from there. Magnus, the Not Red, asked, how do they travel to a specific spot? So, if I am to specify, so you said you have the jump that is not very accurate. So, how do they get from there to the place they want to go? Is there any super like faster than light travel other than that, or they just rely on good old propulsion?
They rely on if they want to get somewhere with 100% accuracy, and you're not a Volk with how accurate they are, you can risk doing a slipstream jump, which almost all factions, once they initially exit the slipstream jump, they don't have any shielding, and their energy systems are going to need a moment to more or less reinitialize, because the jump is almost acts as not a full electromagnetic field, but it certainly affects the if you exit a jump and all your systems are completely fine and everything's still fully charged, it either was a short jump or you were really lucky. But typically there is an effect on electrical systems and the ship's weapons and the ship's propulsion, and even oftentimes life support. Sometimes ships have gone through a really far slipstream jump, and when they came out, they all quickly died because their life support was completely disabled. So that has happened. But like I said, depending on the faction, also depends on the accuracy of the slipstream jump. Amongst the human factions, the most accurate slipstream jumps are from the Terran Republic. They have the most accurate jumps. But even then, they are still within a 10 or so light year diameter. What's the terminology? Around where they want to end up.
Maybe.
Huh?
Astronomical units, maybe something like that.
Yeah, they tend to be still off by at least a little bit, still within like a day's travel of where they actually are trying to end up. And again, they have instruments to more or less predict the general area. And as long as there's like no major asteroid fields and no like planets directly in the center of where they're jumping, they typically will make that jump with confidence, and 9 out of 10 times they'll typically make a safe jump. But if you want 100% accuracy on where you're getting, though, with no risks, like the slipstream jump, they typically have to go on propulsion. They have their basic engines, which are pretty fast compared to what we have now. Like, they can travel a good number of light years away from between two destinations fairly quickly, depending on the faction. But we're still talking, like, for example, from Mordred to a planet called Borith 4, which is in lore. Borith 4 is at the very edge of the sovereignty space, at the very edge of their territory, right on the border between them and the Terran Republic. From Mordred to there, if they went solely off propulsion, it'd probably be a 10-year journey.
Okay. So basically, to generalize for everyone who's listening, if they want to go to another solar system that is more far away than they can get with normal propulsion, they will risk a jump and they will get within the solar system, not specifically to a planet, but roughly in it.
Yeah.
And from there on, they just use normal propulsion between planets and between close solar systems.
I will throw in this little tidbit. I was gonna hold off on it, but there is a technology developed by mostly by the Sovereignty that is a third option, but it only works in their territory. They have what's called I'm trying to remember the exact terminology I use in my notes. I can't. I'll just give it its bit. It's basically it's a way to pinpoint. It's their substitute for being able to pinpoint accurately land jumps with the slipstream. Think of it as like an aim. It's a giant. They're giant circular stations that they've built, and when you activate the slipstream jump and the field is produced around it, what these cylinder circular, basically tubes in space, usually are big enough to fit like a small number of ships in their center. It'll basically narrow the field. It'll force the field to be narrowed, and it will directly shoot the slipstream at a coinciding or another connected cylindrical port gate, essentially. So the best way to describe it is they're gates, more or less. It's still the slipstream jump. It still has all the negatives with the slipstream jump, minus the lack of accuracy. And it's only between that and its coinciding and connected port gate. So the two gates are directly connected, and it'll send the ship with the slipstream jump to the next one. So there's a network of them, but they only connect one to one to one to one. Like, you can't get into this and then shoot off to a completely different one in the territory. It connects to a very specific other gate. And like I said, it's not in the Terran Republic's territory, it's not in the Warborn's territory, it's not in the Gretches, unless they've expanded that far, and it's not in the Vokes. It only works inside their faction space.
So basically, we can say something like Stargate then.
Not exactly, because you're still traveling that distance. You're not like direct. It's not like a gateway where you're directly walking through and smoothly on the other side. Think of it more as it's just a guide. Like,
it keeps you on the right track.
You know how a barrel of a gun guides the projectile forward in a specific flow, and the moment it exits the barrel, it can potentially, umbrella away from the target the further away it is. Well, think of the port gates as more or less a continuous barrel to the target, like to the point you're trying to get. So instead of the bullet potentially veering off because you're shooting so far away, now it's being continually guided and will be prevented from umbrellaing or veering off course. That's all the gates are. You're still moving. It's not like the projectile is magically just appearing at its target. It's still traveling that distance. It's just now you've removed the factor of having to worry about it veering off of its intended course.
Okay.
I hope I'm making sense.
Yeah, I think it's fairly clear. I just wanted to
Definitely.
make sure everyone understands. Okay, so go for it, Nathan. Next one.
I will pick up a question from Uros, and I actually want to read out the full question because I love the way he's worded this. He says, next I'll delve into one of my favourite themes of war crimes. Is there anything in particular, one weapon, action, etc., that most/all factions would consider to be too much?
Siding with the Gretsch is considered a unanimous no for pretty much every faction that isn't Gretsch. Other than like in terms of like specific like attacks or motions or things to perform on another faction, the Rathan have no such beliefs or hindrances. The human factions are the only ones really amongst each other who really have anything like that. And what that would typically be, and it's broken all the time, is none of the human factions see it as it's a weird word. In a silent way. It's not like they've had like a UN meeting about this. But in a silent way, they don't side with Xenos against other human factions. Like, that's a no-go. The Warborn, if they're fighting each other, that's different. But if a Xenos species is attacking another, and let's say a Warborn colony is under attack, and there's a sovereignty ship, and they see, I don't know, let's say the Volk are attacking it. It is virtually, it's a silent code amongst the humans that these are monsters. Like, these aliens, truly alien species, are our enemy. No matter what form of humanity you are. Whether you're an evolved crypta, whether you're a hardened, battered, vicious Warborn, or a well-organized, well-developed military force like the Terran Republic, you do not side with the Xenos in such a conflict. If you are going to choose sides, you fight off the Xenos. Then you can fight each other. So typically, if a sovereignty vessel were to see or to come across something like that, they would fight off the Xenos force. Even potentially, depending on the level of the threat, actually landing troops to directly support in a ground offensive against them. Normally, though, the moment the aliens are driven off, the sovereignty in particular would just immediately then harvest the world for the new blood bags everybody represents. But out of a code of conduct, they'd probably wait maybe a day or two and then attack them. If it was the other way around, the Warborn wouldn't wait.
Yeah, fair. Okay, so speaking of war crimes, brother Dr. Kelkio asks, which faction has the most artillery? So which has the most boom potential?
Well, I actually have to think about that a little bit, because most factions have a form of artillery.
Yeah. So which has the most boom per unit?
It's kind of a three-way tie between the Terran Republic, the Volk, and the sovereignty a little bit, because the sovereignty's artillery, though, I might throw them out of the running now that I think about it, because they have artillery, but it's not like a large variety. They just have really effective artillery, but they're kind of limited on how many different versions of it they can. So I'd say it's between the Terran Republic and the Volk.
All right. Just before we move in, I would like to say hi to Nightlock and Demon's mom, who jumped in the chat.
Yep, thank you guys for showing up. And just to explain to you guys and anybody who may be joining, I'll repeat it again. I'm not running the Q&A here. As you guys are the potential clientele and the fan base for what this is going to be, I felt it was most appropriate to have representatives of the community supporting this handle the Q&A, which is why Nathan and Tengular are running things. So I only look at the chat if it's super chats like that. I'll directly grab and answer and respond to. Other than that, I'm letting them lead the way, if you will. So if you're gonna at anybody, at them. So it's Nathan X2000 or Tengular. Is that your?
It's Alex Grigorov in the YouTube chat. So.
Oh, okay, so yeah, just at one of them, and they can they'll grab your question hopefully and pass it my way.
And also, hello, Alex, and I'm gonna butcher this. Sunderland, or I cannot read this. Sorry, the new person in chat. Hello.
I was gonna say you are reading it 10 times better than I ever would,
I
so I
mean, I'm
think you're the
trying,
closest
so
we're gonna get.
I'm trying my best. So I apologize if anyone. Okay.
Mind if I ask the next question?
Yeah, go for it.
Well, okay, so, and I've got to appreciate this one from Gavin because he's looking at the flip side of this, saying who is the most likely to be diplomatic? Like, I'd imagine in Warglaive, everything's quite grimdark, so this is quite the contrast. So who would be the most likely to be diplomatic or timid in relations?
Timid?
Well,
Like,
maybe who is the most sly and conniving? Let's say, who
Oh,
tries
Rathan.
to do things with. Maybe.
Rathan, if they feel completely outmatched, they have two modes. If they feel like they can easily wipe you out with minimal losses, it's raid time. If they are running into an armada and the heavily defended planet with proper like defensive batteries and planetary guns, they'll be like, "You want to trade?" Although they can't speak our language at all, so in Rith's case, he would use a voice box and directly communicate with them with that, but in most Rathan cases, they'd probably have to send a typed communication.
I think
So
they would
I
be
think-
they would be like that, but that's it's not exactly diplomacy as much as it is like here we can't kill you, so here's some goods we stole from other people we did kill.
I think what he meant was, in that case, the Rathan would have to be definitely backed into a corner before being diplomatic. I think he meant just in general, like who would be without the prerequisite of being totally threatened, who would be more willing to be diplomatic outright.
Virtually nobody. The closest thing I can think of to like diplomatic would be the Vogue.
Well, he did say most likely, not definitively, but
Out of the human factions, it'd have to be the sovereignty, but it's not really diplomacy. It's as much as it is what's the manner in which you surrender to us, and we will promise to treat you in a certain way once you do. But it's not really like, hey, let's have a peace treaty. Like, hey, let's have a non-aggression pact. And any crypto would see that as the equivalent of looking at a puppy or a rat on the ground and saying, hey, you want a peace treaty?
okay.
But as for the Volk being diplomatic, the Volk tend to not care too much about humans. And the only reason they usually get into conflict with us is if there's something we're interfering with that they consider theirs. Or if they have an basically, it's... With the conflict with the Volk, the conflicts are, to us, very random. Like, sometimes they'll completely avoid our space. Sometimes they'll directly attack it, and they'll stop the moment they get whatever it is they come up with, even if they're completely crushing an attacking fleet and completely obliterating our asses. They will immediately leave the moment they get what they want. Whether it's a person, an item, an artifact, something specific that they were after, they'll immediately retreat. So I guess that's a form of what that is, but it's not, again, it's not like really, hey, let's lay down arms. It's more like, we don't care about you until we have to. Walks away with middle finger pointed behind back.
Fair.
So I'd just like to jump in and say, is it okay if I reference something that Nightlock has just said?
Is it a question?
Yeah, go for it. No, not really. It's kind of a more of a point.
Yeah, it's not a question, more of a disclaim, but he said that he's getting annoyed of all these questions are essentially, is it like my faction from 40k? And not to speak out of turn on Aspen's behalf, but I'm safe in saying that Warglaive isn't supposed to replace people's love of 40k. It's supposed to be a brand new Grimdark that's supposed to explore, you know, a lot of the same ideas of the genre, because Grimdark is ultimately a genre. But it's supposed to be a completely brand new universe, so of course there's going to be some overlap. But make sure that these questions are oriented towards Warglaive itself, because again, it's not trying to replace 40k. It's more so a brand new universe that people can get invested in alongside 40k if people choose.
Yeah, and I will add an addendum to this. I don't mind questions that are like, hey, what's this? Is this faction going to be like this 40k faction? Like, if I understand that people will use comparisons because they just want a frame of reference. But again, if you're asking with the intention of, hey, once I leave 40k for this because fuck 40k, what's the faction that you're intending to make to replace this? Like, no, that's not the mindset that Warglaive is operating under. I'm not developing any of this with this is going to replace this faction in 40k because I intend to replace it. No, that's not the intention. Warglaive is its own thing with its own inspirations. Yes, there's going to be overlap. There's a lot of historical influence on Warglaive, and there's plenty of historical influence on 40k. So just on that alone, there's been some overlap. But I don't allow, you know, I don't allow the mindset, even with all my genuine frustrations with Games Workshop and their product, this is my product. This is not something... It's not intended as a weapon between two different fandoms. If you enjoy 40k and you have no problem with how it is right now, this is still potentially for you because it's its own thing. If you hate 40k and you want something completely new, this is for you as well. This is its own thing at the end of the day. That's the only thing I'll leave it at. But Nathan more or less worded it perfectly.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so just to before we move on from that, I'm gonna rephrase a question that kind of started this whole thing. Maybe try and keep it away from any references. Do you have any faction that relies on terror tactics in general to wage war, or do they all just use terror as a weapon?
So, terror as in, like, terrorist attacks, underhanded methods, bombing, intimidation, that kind of methodology. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, basically.
Pretty much all the human factions, with the exception of the Warborn, so just the two human factions between the Sovereignty and the Terran Republic, they use that to a degree. The Sovereignty use it the most out of human factions. Sometimes intentionally, sometimes not. Again, the way the Crypta view the rest of humanity is that the rest of humanity owes it to them to provide them sustenance, their food. Yes, they understand that, hey, we were once human, and they see that, you know, that in themselves. But more or less, the Sovereignty no longer consider the rest of humanity on their level. Like, it's the same way we look at monkeys, but even a little bit more degrading. Like, we're Homo sapien sapien. Here's a gorilla. Here's a chimpanzee. It's like, oh, how cute, how adorable. But they're nasty, gross creatures that also rummage through your luggage if you let them. Like, they don't like the rest of humanity. So, typically, if they go and they harvest a world, like I said before, they'll actually drop down, essentially the equivalent of like an intercom system, or they'll hack into an intercom system that's on the planet, and they will announce their arrival. And they will tell the world, if it's Terran Republic, for example, surrender, and you will be processed and brought to the nearest harvest world for blood transfusions, where you shall remain for the rest of your days. They don't see that as a threat. They don't see that as I'm going to hurt you. They see that as you are now fulfilling the only reason we allow you to exist at the moment. Like, they're fulfilling a purpose for their society, and those people should feel honored to provide us sustenance. That's the mindset. So in a way, that's a form of terror that's used against both the Terran Republic and the Warborn, because other than the Rathan, the only other faction you absolutely do not want above, except for the Gretsch, but the only other faction other than the Gretsch and the Rathan you do not want to see their ship in orbit, no matter fucking what, is a sovereignty vessel, because they are there to collect, and it ain't really you they want, it's what's in your veins. So they employ a form of terror for sure, but it's half the time unintentional. Other than them, the Gretsch use it intentionally, but that's through they actually directly, through a psychic means, actually influence people's fears. So I guess this is like the one bit of lore about the Gretsch I will spoil a little bit. The Gretsch, as a species, they have a effect. It's not known because of how much of an enigma the Gretsch really are, whether this is intentional or not, but they give off a psychic, like kind of like a psychic impression or aura that they exhume around them. Just one Gretsch baser grunt is enough to make like a group of 10 people surrounding it feel queasy, uneasy, fearful, anxious, depressed, like just putting you in this like really like slum of emotion. An entire attack fleet, or even just a single ship full of them engaging a planet, the moment they enter the atmosphere of a planet, that psychic vibe and aura that they give off covers the entirety of the planet. Like, you can feel them coming before they even land. And it's this feeling of dread, of fear, of hopelessness. Even the most stalwart, war-happy Warborn has been made to hesitate to engage in battle with the Gretsch. They are often referred to by the Volk as the ultimate plague in the galaxy, and should they ever face them in one final bout, the Volk will likely see their end, well before the enemy has even entered range to attack.
Okay. So, do you want to take next one, Nathan, or?
Yeah, I'll question.
Maybe we can combine the Dragonis question with the Gavin, because they're kind of the same subject.
Do you mean the one about planet killers?
Yeah, and the
Yeah.
OP weapon.
Planet killers.
So what's the question?
But are there any weapons that are like able to just completely wipe out planets? And it can be any type of weapon, just as long as it has the ability to completely destroy a planet.
Pretty much
Or
every
a-
faction has something like that. There are weapons like that. I'll just leave it at that, because if I go into specifics, we might be here all day.
Oh,
But I will say,
Okay.
every faction has weapons like that. Almost every faction rarely uses it, though. It's a oh shit, we have no choice kind of thing.
like
so
a
basically-
final gambit
Yeah.
sort of thing.
Basically the nuke button. The big red button that they have to press.
Even then, like, if a planet, for the sovereignty, for example, if a harvest world is under attack by, let's say, the Gretsch, and the world is fucked, but they feel that the Gretsch will abandon it eventually, they will not press the big red button. Even if the planet is completely lost and all its resources are completely absorbed by the Gretsch, as long as the planet is left eventually, and they feel that the Gretsch will give it up, they will not press the button. It's not just a last-ditch effort. It's a last-ditch effort if there is absolutely no chance that what the situation is recoverable. And that's pretty much how it is for all human factions.
So, question from Nightlock about the story and I think the kind of the books. Are you going to focus on different characters and their stories in the war, or are you going to get an overview of individuals in a battle, more like a general armies and maybe
a little bit of both. Though in the previous Q&A, people seem to be up for like an event being like the first book. What I'm working on right now, because I feel like it's a better introduction, especially from like a specific point of view, and one that people play that the fan base can like get behind. Is right now I'm working on a book series about one of the key characters in the Sovereignty, a Helsing by the name of Melina. She is going to be basically the reader is going to follow her journey from being first awakened in this universe, being given her education, biased education, by the Sovereignty, and her learning about the galaxy and how it really is firsthand through battle, through fighting, through combat. And it'll be several books going over the biggest portions of her life up to the modern point in the lore. And I won't spoil too much, but that's what I'm working on first. There are I'm also going to start alongside that. Once I get at least most of the first Melina book written. I am then also writing a series about the big event in all of Warglaive lore, which is where the modern paradigm is set up, which is the reunification war between the Warborn, the Sovereignty, and the Terran Republic. When the three factions realign, or basically re-reveal each other and engage with one another. That is going to be a decently long book series, because there's quite the number of things that occur throughout the events of the reunification war. And there's just so many stories within that one event that it's just going to take a while.
Okay.
So, simple answer is both. Like, I'm writing both, essentially.
Okay. Just before we move on, I might want to go back because we missed one question from Urosocium.
Yeah, I was actually just about to pick up this one. I have been writing them down in case we do move past them. So
yeah, go ahead.
This one lined up.
Sure.
Because I actually really want to know, because it relates to a question that I had. But out of curiosity, more than anything, are there giant space monsters out there? Now, I don't think he means like Rancor size from Star Wars. I mean planet size space monsters.
Anything that exists in... Yeah. There.
I will tell you guys to remember the name Nagu.
Oh.
Okay, that's... we're getting something.
Yes. Feed us, Lord Daddy. Feed us the names. The tiny drip feeds.
Just
that we live off of.
Keep that name in mind. Nagu.
Okay, I'm gonna add it to my lexicanum then. Okay. By the way, have we asked anything about the offense versus defense? I can't remember.
What, sorry?
Have we asked anything about offense versus defense as tactics? I can't remember if we have had a question like that.
If you have a very specific question with that, like, depending...
Well, one question from Gavin Isaacs is, what faction uses defensive strategies and defensive structures the most?
Probably the Folk. They don't they don't typically attack as much as they're on the defensive. So they use a lot of defensive strategies. The Terran Republic are probably the other ones who also use quite a bit of defensive strategies, because they're sandwiched in between the Sovereignty and the Warborn, and being constantly in conflict with both. They are obvious. They get hit a lot. So they've grown used to establishing very strong, what they hope a lot of the time is unsiegeable planets, which that tends to be disproven quite a lot. But yeah, there is that there, and those are probably the core. There are defensive strategies for each faction, but if you're talking about like who would be more apt for such strategies, it'd be those ones. Offensive, pretty much everybody is incredibly offensive, but it'd probably be Warborn and the Gretsch are like the most like run in and fight. Warborn, they love melee combat. They ranged is good and all, but it's not quite as honorable and quite as song-worthy as running in and hacking a Helsing's head off, or ripping the intestines out of a or if they have intestines, attempting to rip the exoskeleton off of a Voke and see what guts are underneath that shit. They're probably the most like run in and fight next to the Gretsch.
Yes. Have we missed anything, Nathan, or should we just keep on going with the questions?
There is one from Forlorn, but I think you had answered that in the live chat, so...
Yeah, that's what I was going with the terror and stuff. That's why I asked this question. Like, I was kind of rephrasing it, so to keep away from.
Okay, I'll throw in a quick, little cheeky quick question from me personally, but and this is just to make things a little bit more light-hearted, but within the lore of Warglaive, are we expecting to see any little Easter eggs, like in reference to the community, such as maybe with one of the factions they may deploy a secret weapon called, and it may be called like the Dragonis Protocol, or maybe the Warborn unleash a new weapon and it runs on something called the Tangular system. Will there be any references to the people that are initially behind Warglaive,
Any hints about the... Okay, then.
There will be Easter eggs.
Yes. There are Easter eggs.
Oh, that's...
It's like, keep your eyes peeled.
Yeah. I also like how you've placed the vampire mates front and center of the stream. Just some eye candy to keep us entertained.
Yeah.
He knows what sells. Can't blame the man. He knows what sells.
I mean, if he wants to go for what sells, he either just needs to move the picture to the main waifu gal on the throne, maybe? Or, I don't know.
Yeah, I already zoomed in on her before, though.
Fair.
I agree, or roast. There has to be a Syl reference somewhere. Has to be a Syl reference.
She is the Holy Spirit that shines light upon all. She is the good in the grimdark.
You hold someone.
Exactly. Yes. There we go. On point.
This is the saint Silas Andaris.
Actually, in terms of the sovereignty, it's one of their goddesses in their pantheon, Maya.
Yeah, don't
Okay.
worry, that was just a joke, but obviously, somewhere in the law, I'm
there
sure,
may or
I'm sure
may
someone
not
can
be
get.
a Sil reference in her theology.
Yeah, we're just messing about, so
Mm.
we'll be looking forward to any references that we might find.
So, next
Uh,
question.
Okay, so one question from Urus, which I'm kind of interested as well. I'm gonna kind of expand on it. Um, are there any ancient races that are no longer around, and have they left any artifacts or artifact worlds or anything, any technology that might be still around?
There are.
Hmm. So there is this mystery about the old ones, let's say, the old
No.
race.
There are no old ones. There are
Uh,
ancient races that are now gone.
Yeah, sorry, I
Oh.
just missed. I made the wrong reference. Sorry. I don't know why I said that.
One thing I am actively avoiding in terms of a trope is a all-creator god race. There is nothing like that in Warglaive.
I meant more like ancient race that is already gone. I didn't. I wasn't trying to make any other reference to other like big grim darks. Let's say.
Yeah. There are ancient, now gone races, though. And they have left artifacts. And the most knowledgeable race out of all of the current factions about them would be the Volk. They're the oldest race that are still active. As far as I know, compared to the Gretsch, anyway.
Okay.
Looks like Nylock had a question.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Nathan, you can go for it as well.
I said Oros did have a question beforehand that says, actually, wait, no, this one you've just covered. Okay, so are the Van Helsings and Warborn particular
Not,
enemies of each other?
no Van. It's just Helsings.
Yeah. When you say vampires, Van Helsing's Van comes up quite often. So.
Yeah, just
J
nix that,
Yeah.
leave Helsings. There you go.
Okay. So anyway, the question was again, can you just repeat it because we kind of went past it.
My chat has just suddenly scrolled up to the top.
Let me say, okay,
Yeah,
are the
like,
Helsings and
yeah, you
Warborn
cover it,
particular
man.
enemies? Yeah, are the Helsings and Warborn particular enemies? So basically, are the Warborn like dissing the Empress and saying, yeah, you're not really the ultimate leader and the superiority and stuff like that?
Actually, in a weird way, the Warborn respect the Empress of the Sovereignty. There is a specific event that occurred during the Reunification War that led to that respect, but what they do find it offensive, the idea that the Sovereignty are superior. They don't. The thing is, the Warborn definitely think of them as the superior, but they think they don't think they're superior because of any genetic reason. They think that they're better because they actually live what they believe to be the right way. They believe in the right gods, they believe in the right methodology, and their culture as a whole is superior. They believe they believe you are more superior the more accomplishments as a warrior and as an accomplished artisan, as an accomplished fighter and shaman and mystic. Any aspect of that, of their culture that you most dedicate to yourself, or dedicate yourself to, sorry, is what makes you better than others. It's your dedication. It's your willingness to go above and beyond your station and win the right to have songs written about you and have drinks named after you and have people's children's down the generations want to be named after your legacy in hopes that they will achieve greatness as you achieved. That's how the Warborn live. The idea that someone is just superior on a genetic level is not present with them. They believe you can surpass any genetic limitation with enough hard work and support from the gods. So that again, it's part of that cultural clash that does not mesh between the two. But as for any kind of disrespect or dislike of the Empress, they kind of see the Warborn view the Empress as the head shaman or mystic of the sovereignty. They find it incredibly improper. They wouldn't word it that way. They find it weird that she's their leader, but they respect the Empress by reputation alone, understanding through their lens that that's what she is. She's the head mystic of the sovereignty. In terms of direct rivalry between the Warborn and Helsings, there actually is quite a bit. Helsings and the standard Warborn fighter are about on equal terms entering a battle. Warborn might have a slight advantage in certain ways. I wish to elaborate on that, but at the same time, I kind of want to don't go into too many details about the Warborn, still leaving them a little bit vague. Because I think it'll be far more interesting when you guys actually see some more tangible examples. I have the next artwork Pierce is working on after the one he's currently working on for me is a piece that once that's done, I will then elaborate on the Warborn a lot more. Because without that visual assistance, I don't want you guys getting the wrong idea from my poor wording. So without that, I'm trying to be restrictive on how I describe the Warborn and how they fight too closely until I have the proper reference for it. So, but I will say the standard Warborn, after a certain thing happens to them before battle, are about on equal terms with the standard Helsing.
Okay.
Nice.
Yep.
So,
That makes quite a lot of sense.
Mm.
So, shall we move on then, Nathan, or do you want to?
Yeah,
ask anything else?
if Asmundgun feels that that question has been answered.
has it not been?
Oh,
I
no,
mean,
like
up to
oh, no,
you.
like, I was just saying, like, if you finished clearing up on that question, so you've got nothing else to add for that one.
I feel that feels rather wrapped up, and if it isn't, I can
That's
rephrase this
fine.
question. That's fine.
We may elaborate if anything comes up, so we can just move on.
Yeah. Tangela, have you got any personal questions? Because I noticed that you've not added any yourself.
Well, a personal question. There is one that I'm kind of curious. Are there any like strange places or anomalies or zones that may be interesting in the lore? Some like different star systems or areas of space that are either unexplored or have something weird about them that maybe we don't know about, or maybe it's has some other effect.
There is quite a bit of those throughout the galaxy. Most notable of all is in the Gretch's space, what's considered their home system. It's considered a forbidden territory for pretty much every faction. Even if you get past the armada of their ships that are constantly expanding their territory at a very slow pace, if you were to somehow get past those undetected and get to their system, you would never be heard from again. Their core system has been seen by the Voke, and they have made it to... They successfully completely... The Voke's biggest offensive throughout their history against the Gretch, having fought them for so many millennia, they have actually successfully at one point manifested a fleet of vessels massive enough to breach the near unthinkable number of Gretch vessels that they had to break through, almost a blockade that completely surrounded their system. Once they breached through with sizable losses, but still had enough left over to then make a beeline for their core system in the attempt to obliterate them, there was an active telemetry transmissioned back to the Volk's homeworld of what was being seen. And the queen at the time left the equivalent of like memories to her descendants, because that's how it works. Like the queen not only passes down her title to her successor, but also her memories. It's almost like a form of reincarnation, but at the same time, it is a different person. It's just the memories. So one thing that was recollected during this transmission was once they entered the core system, the amount of Gretsch vessels that were following them to attempt to stop them stopped well before they got anywhere near their actual core planets. And this, part of the telemetry that was transmissioned was that every planet that they were passing mysteriously was barren. We're not just talking it had no plant life or animals. There was no surface. The planets were almost completely flat. Still, spherical, but as in there's no divots, there's no mountains, there's no plateaus, canyons, rivers, lakes, oceans, nothing. Just flat, sand-like terrain. And the last bit of telemetry the Volk were able to maintain before their fleet was completely wiped out was an echoing, deep voice. And it only said a single name. No.
Ah. Okay, the plot thickens then.
That is the only recorded access to the core worlds of Gretsch space.
Okay. I think that...
Spicy.
Yeah. Also, one thing to ask for all that kind of maybe we missed. Do you have any artwork or anything for the Gretsch done, or do you
No.
think of doing it? Okay,
Unfortunately, early on we had some sketches. They're no longer accurate, though. There has been fixes to their lore since, and if I were to show them, they wouldn't even really be accurate at all. So, as of now, there is no artwork for the Gretsch.
Okay, I just want to make sure I didn't miss something, just to make some reference. Oh, okay, fair.
Adds to the mystery, though, until I can finally reveal them.
Yeah, more fun that way.
Yeah, I just wanted to welcome 3 people to the stream, that being Billy Mount, Lee Broyles, and MD Survivalist.
Welcome,
Hello
guys.
to them as well.
Thank you for joining. Thank you.
And I believe you got, I'm not sure if you'd seen that, but the super chat from Gavin Isaacs.
Ah, yeah, it didn't come up.
I am so sorry. Yeah, I didn't see that. Gavin, thank you. I apologize. I missed it. Any waifu is a Moraine reference? Nah.
It's
She'd like to think so,
uh. Is it okay if I pose another own personal question?
Yeah,
I
that's
don't
fine.
think.
Okay, doc. So in terms of books, then, when the first individual or set of books are completed, are we going to be seeing a full release all at once, like audiobooks and hardback books, or are you going to push for audiobooks first and then have physical productions later down the line?
Other way
Now,
around.
what speed can we expect these releases when they are completed, obviously?
When they are completed, it'll probably be hardcover, soft cover. I don't know if that's the right term. Paperback books. That'll be first. because in terms of production, I'm looking into it more and more. I know Amazon has a program set up where they will help publish your books and actually print them and everything. So that's a potential way of doing that. I could also set up the means of production myself and then ship out the books myself. That'd be a lot slower. I'm looking into it more and more, but it'd probably start with the actual physical sales of the books. Audiobook? I don't know if you guys want me to do the audiobook. I'd probably have to look into hiring a voice-over artist to do that.
Well, I was going to say, my question was more so along the lines of, as well, will we actually see audiobooks made of it? Oh, not see, but hear audiobooks,
Hopefully.
I should say.
I'd like that to happen. Definitively, I don't know. Like I said, I'm probably not the right person to voice my own novel. So I'd have to hire a voice actor or voice over artist to do an audiobook for me, which will likely not be cheap. I haven't looked into it too much. Probably differs rate to rate for people. So I do not know if there will be audiobooks. I want there to be, but I don't know.
Okay. So you have it planned, but we'll see in production as it comes. Okay, so let's jump on back to the questions from the chat. Gavin Isaacs asks, what is the most comedic of the factions? So, do we have anyone who we can laugh at their escapades or...
The Rathan, when they're not doing the graping. They're fairly comedic sometimes, because they're underhanded tactics in particular. I cannot wait to see community memes about their shit, because a common Rathan mentality is if they attack like a colony, and let's say the colony fights off their initial attack wave, and they retreat, they'll then they'll like quickly scrap together some like hand drills to dig under the ground, trying to dig up under the base. And then like they do that, and then they get under the base, but the bottom of the base is made out of a metal as well, so it's like and they gotta back all the way back up, down the whole up way. They gotta report to the clan boss and say can't go under. There's metal underneath too. And they're like, dang nabbit. And then the next day, the next night, they like make stink bombs and throw those over the walls sneakily. And then when that happens, they prepare to run in when people desperate to escape like a building or two try and like run out. So like, oh, we'll attack them then. And then if that doesn't happen because they have like gas masks or something, they're like, God damn it. And they'll keep going more underhanded and more skeevy and until finally something sticks and works. So their escapades, again, outside of the more horrific aspects of the Rathan, I think will be fairly entertaining. Warborn being more jubilant and enjoying battle and fighting and combat and the warrior spirit. There's plenty of shenanigans that could probably go on with them as well. Especially with drunken stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm answering these questions well, because you guys always end them with, okay. Like you guys,
yeah.
I don't mean to criticize it, but it's like you guys are coming off like almost disinterested. It's kind of it's kind of getting to me. I'm like, my answer's this bad.
No, don't get me wrong.
It's more so confirmation that we've fully enclosed off that question and we're ready to move on. Would you agree? That's why I do it.
Yeah, it's also just so flat toned though.
Also, don't get me wrong. I'm getting so invested in your explanations that I kind of forget what I was thinking and doing. So the only thing I can say is, okay.
Good answer. Good answer.
Yeah, that's pretty much the best I can figure out when we finish talking. So don't take me wrong.
I was
And to
gonna say, like,
do
don't forget, me and Tangela are also invested in this as well. Like, we're technically also part of the people that, want to listen to like hear all this lore and these answers. So we're listening deeply. Like for a minute, even we're like, oh wait, hang on. Okay, so next question.
Yeah,
okay.
we're
Very
like
good response.
we forget that we're actually leading this stuff and not just listening gape mod.
And speaking of, for anybody who's tuning in just now, because I know we just hit a spike of more people joining up. How we're running this Q&A is two representatives of you guys, the community, and the eventual customer base, and the people I'm hopefully catering this universe to. I thought it would be very appropriate if I had two representatives of the community, Nathan, who's a mod in my Discord, and a friend of mine, and Tangular, who's another wonderful man who's joined our community recently. I thought it'd be appropriate if we had you guys run this whole thing, as I find that probably to be the most appropriate way to do everything unfiltered and I basically to completely remove the factor or the possibility that I'm like picking and choosing questions and ignoring others for any nefarious, any questionable reasons. Like letting these guys run the show. And they're grabbing the questions from the Q&A. They're grabbing questions from the chat from you guys. So you guys are still actively involved. They are grabbing your questions, and they've been very good about it, and I appreciate it. I'm just elaborating that for anybody who's joining fresh. And I will be grabbing like super chats. I will directly respond to those. I got my eye out for like the highlights. But other than that, I'm letting them run the show. Like I'm just here to answer the questions. I'm not controlling anything. So that's how it's been running, and they've been very good about it.
So speaking of that, I would like to say hello to Moraine, Murderous Kitten, and who else joined? I think that's it. Hello.
That's it for the people that have commented.
Yeah.
That we know of has joined. So.
Yep.
And also, by the way, Asmogon is not really looking in the chat, so maybe if he misses any direct references, just don't worry about it. I'm keep an eye. Yeah, especially Moraine and her usual antics.
Yes.
Just because I glanced at the chair real quick. I saw this, so I'll answer it. Chaos Raven, I answered that earlier in the streams. So I highly recommend you watch through and listen for that, because I did go through the full spiel. If somebody feels like they can sum it up in 200 characters or less in response to him in the chat, please do so. But I already went through how the faster than light travel works in Warglaive.
Yeah, we kind of gone through that, so maybe rewatch it later. Okay, so shall we move on then, Nathan?
Yes, we shall. I'd like to point out that Gavin Isaacs for $4.99 US is saying, if you need sound designers for audiobooks, I got you reading, though I can't. Wait, got you reading, though I can't do. What?
I don't
think I understand that.
I think he's implying that if you read it, he can do the sound design, but he cannot read it himself. Maybe that's the thing. If I understand it correctly.
Not to diss his work or anything, but I can do the sound design of an audiobook. I can do that. It's just the voice acting and reading through the whole book. I could do that, but I don't think I'd be the right person for it. I don't think I can do enough diverse voices and do them consistently enough. Like, that's definitely something I'd feel more comfortable hiring a professional voiceover artist to do, whereas I am not. I'm confident making the 3D models for the miniatures and stuff like this, but when it comes to that kind of stuff, definitely going to be hiring on people for that. I'm entertaining, don't get me wrong. I'm confident in my ability to entertain, absolutely. But, yeah.
So, just to highlight, that was a donation as well. So, again, thank you for donating to the Warglaive machine.
Wait, what?
May it ever press on. Your donations help Asmogon achieve his dream.
Yeah, I much appreciate it, man. Like, I'm sorry I missed that.
Yeah, for some reason it doesn't come up.
Normally the alert goes off, but I haven't heard it.
It didn't came up.
I think it did, but Asmogon was so deep in lore explanations that.
I mean, even I missed it, so yeah. You can judge how entertaining he is.
Mm.
Yeah.
I'm just scanning through for the next question.
Where were we again?
Oh, okay. I've got one from Calcul. Should be a fairly quick one. But are there any double layer mysteries in Warglaive that is a mystery in itself, hidden behind a mystery, making it so that it is only revealed as you uncover another mystery? So are we expecting to see any really deep layered things that may be spread across books?
Yeah, if I understand that correctly, there is the reason why humanity has come to this galaxy. That's a ongoing mystery I intend to leave plenty of trailing clues to.
Okay. So there will be conspiracies then, as far as I understand.
The only hint I'll give at the moment for that mystery is every single faction, every single human faction, when they use the term Earth or Old Terra, it's Earth. The phrase Earth in particular in all three is usually a word. It's a word that in their languages, like the Sovereignty speak Necra, the Terran Republic speak. I haven't got a specific name for the language yet, but I guess it would just be Terran as they see it. But it's kind of a mash between Japanese, English, and German. And with the Warborn, they speak a more guttural, old school tribal language. There's some influences in there. It's like Old Norse, some Gaelic, and I want to mix in Mongolian. I want to say Mongolian's mixed in there, but at the same time, it's like I don't know how well that would mix in. So I really ought to hire a linguist to help me out with like setting up a proper like language. Like if this ever turns into like, this is like probably unlikely, but if it ever turned into like like a TV show series or a movie series or anything like that, and you had to hear languages, I really ought to hire somebody to come up with how it would sound. But for the sake of like writing and everything's just translated into English. But yeah. Where I was going with that is each of their languages, they have the term Earth in there, and almost all of them have it in a negative connotation. The Sovereignty, the term Earth means Great Plague, like apocalyptic plague. For the Terran Republic, Earth is in reference to an old mythology of great weakness and destruction, a lack of unity and disorder. The Warborn, Earth is the name of a fallen god in their mythology. A god that was once honorable, strong, and powerful, but after influenced by the wrong voices, turned his back on his old values and fell to disgrace. He's kind of like their devil. Well, I guess also more comparable to probably Prometheus, but in the case of Prometheus in Greek mythology, he was kind of a good guy because he gave humanity fire, but think of like a negative connotation of like Prometheus. That's how they kind of view the Earth God.
So they kind of left it there, and they don't want to do anything with it at any point.
Because of all the time that's passed and the degradation and the fact that no one of their societies really, even when they first landed, really remembered Earth too well, Whether that was by design or not, they don't know. Most of them even know the term Earth from their black boxes, which was that's the term that's used, but it was more or less it was a culmination of Earth's literature, history, important figures, and historical events that was stored in a system in each of the spheres of humanity that came to this galaxy. That's the only reason any of them even know the term Earth. But none of them know exactly what it means because each of the black boxes in some way, shape, or form didn't survive intact to their new worlds. And I won't go into too much detail of why that is, whether that's intentional. What I will say is that's just one universal thing between all of their factions. They all have just, in some way, shape, or form, though, translated the word into their language in a negative connotation.
Okay, so basically just leave it at that. That's Earth is something distant and horrible.
Maybe.
So, yeah, let's just keep it at that. And so there is basically no possibility of any other human faction just popping in then, from what I understand.
Really?
Oh, well, that's what I got. But if you have anything you want to say about it, just go for it. I mean,
No. Your interpretation's your interpretation.
I mean, I was kind of trying to put in a question from Uro Socium because he asked, is there any possibility of a new human faction fucking off from a different galaxy and landing in this one?
Possibly
Yeah.
not. Who's to
I
say?
was just trying to ask it in a more like interesting way, let's say. Okay, so Nathan, would you like to go for next one then?
Yeah, sure. I'd just like to welcome also Artificer Joni as well as Zerus to the stream as well.
Welcome, guys.
And the next question I will pick up on is
Also-
from
Yeah, before we go, I think we missed Chaos Raven 97 as well. Hello.
Yes, Chaos.
Yeah.
Okay. So about that as me being a manlet again.
Yeah.
Sincerest apologies. Okay, so the next question I will go for is one from MD Survivalist, who asks about the genetic differences between the Terran Republic and the Warborn.
Significant.
Any specifics, or is this
Again,
off limits?
going into specifics, I will say... How do I do this? Because the thing is, I want to save my spiel about the Warborn again until I have that artistic reference that Pierce is going to make, so you guys get the right visual. Because I don't want my poor wording to have you guys go, that's a stupid idea. Like, I don't like that. I feel like without that visual reference, if I went into the spiel about them, y'all would be very put off by it. Or at the very least, confused. Because, I don't know, I think I could describe it in an accurate and good way, but there's that off chance that some people will be put off entirely by them, because they just can't really visualize it, because my wording's either just off enough for some folks that it's just too confusing. What I will say is there is a significant difference. The average Warborn, in their general form, are very tall, very bulky, and all of the core worlds they live on have an increased gravity. So they have grown rather bulky and rather tall. They often don't refer to themselves as humans. The Warborn don't even refer to their species as Warborn. That's their culture. They are the Warborn. But they call themselves Jotun. The Jotun Warborn.
I see Norse mythology creeping in.
Quite a bit of Norse mythology references with that.
Lots of-
It's very influenced by Norse mythology.
Very good, very good.
But
Like
they
that.
refer to themselves as the Jotun.
Okay.
I've just got a quick question from Gavin Isaacs, and this one should be fairly quick, if you don't mind me interjecting.
That's fine.
So this will just be it. I think this is a reference to a previous live stream that Asmogon did. But will we see a god as glorious as Flugnog pop up?
Not a god. But I thought about trying to fit in that Easter egg somehow in a non-plot defining way. So I'm working on that. I don't know how I'll fit that in quite yet, but I intend for there to be a fun little Easter egg about that.
Flugnog, the great Jotun of the Warborn.
Easter eggs would be fun. Okay, so have we missed anyone or anything, or kind of lost track of where we were?
No, there's plenty of questions. I'll just scroll up and just ask away. Because there's now like 20 to 21 fluctuating live chat members, so we've definitely got a few to get through.
Yeah, okay, so let's see.
Hit me up, baby. Come on.
Anything you want to say about the Raytheons more than anything you might want to...
You keep changing it because you say Wraithen and then you say Raytheon.
Okay, so is it Rathan, Raytheon? What?
Rathan.
Rathan. Okay, sorry, I can read. My brain is bugging. Rathan. Okay, Rathan.
There you go. Sorry, what was the question? I got held up on your pronunciation.
Anything? Okay, so sorry about that. Anything more you would like to add about the Rathan, or?
I have this shit ton I'd love to say, but it's one of those things. It's like I could rant an hour and a half about the Rathan, or I can allow you guys to learn and absorb their culture, if you will, through the books, through playing them on the tabletop, and eventually through other means as well. What I will say is, I've given the general overview of the Rathan's culture. One, fun fact, I guess I'll say, is not all of the Rathan clans are alike. Most of them have the general stuff I've explained is universal amongst their culture. There is one clan that is vastly different from the others. Vastly different from Riths. Vastly different from... crap. The name just split out of my head. One of the other war bosses. There is a clan amongst them that is considered the outcasts of their culture.
Yeah, you have mentioned it before, so maybe we can check it out. Yeah, link to other more reviews incoming then, probably.
Hopefully.
Okay.
A question from Calkill asks, will we be able to field all of the leaders from Warglaive?
The overall faction leaders? Or do you mean, significant figures?
I think he may also mean lore-specific faction leaders as well, so, everybody of significant importance. Will they each get their own model to field within Warglaive?
Yes, but that's down the line. As of will that they fit in correctly with first edition, I'll have to see once I start conceptualizing and finishing prototypes and playing with the rules and see how everything is balanced. If the faction leaders, in my attempts to add them to the first edition, are initially more of a hindrance at getting everything finished because of their level of OP, I would probably have to exclude them from first edition and add them at a later edition once I'd figured out a proper method of balancing them in. If that's a satisfactory answer. I don't know, is that...
I think it's good for now. I don't want to push too much because I don't want to get any like mysteries you might want to keep for books. Yeah, I can't think of anything else to ask.
But I will say, lore-wise, is most of the faction leaders won't see combat that often, if ever. You tend to avoid showing your neck to the enemy's blade if you can. Because you want to keep that head on there.
Okay.
But tabletop-wise, I feel like that rule, that idea can be bent a little bit.
Yeah, and you've said before you need to kind of work more on the tabletop rules and stuff to be able to answer anything about that, right?
Oh, a lot more.
I
I need to work on that a lot more, but that's down the road.
Okay, so yeah, just keep in mind. Okay, so next one. Do you have anything, Nathan?
Yeah, I have one backed up from Lee Broyles, who asks in relevance again to the tabletop. So he says, so I have been keeping an eye on this periodically, but still a little behind on the concept. Is this going to be an alternative with a playstyle like Warhammer, or is it going to be more tabletop RPG?
Alternative. If I understand the question, the intention is for it to be a war game on the tabletop with full armies. It hopefully will also be an RPG. Like, I would love, because I'm a huge fan of Dungeons and Dragons, and I like pen and paper RPGs like that. So to have one set up for this particular universe would be awesome. I, as of this moment, don't have that laid out. I don't know where to begin exactly with setting that together, but that is intended to be a thing eventually. It's just not right now. It's not the focus, I will say. It's a desired spin-off, it's a desired inclusion, but it's not in development. Unless people really feel they want that first.
Well, hopefully the answer that he gave answers the question posed by Zach Kilgore, who I'd like to welcome to the chat as well.
Welcome.
Who asks something similar or along the lines of would you consider making an RPG along the lines of Rogue Trader?
Yeah, I'm considering it for sure. I really want to do that. It's just priority-wise, my goal is to make the war game.
Lee Burrows also said thank you. That actually answers his question.
All right, awesome.
So,
actually, it looks like Zach asked a question earlier too.
I didn't ask that one for a reason.
Yeah, I kind of missed it as well.
Let me read it.
Yeah, just check it, and I'm not gonna say anything about it.
I'm not sure I understand it.
Yeah,
the wording's a bit odd.
Maybe he. Okay, I'm not gonna go into that.
Yeah, I avoided
Zach,
that.
I will say that first question you asked, could you rephrase it or reword it so it's more clear what you're asking, please? Because I'm not sure exactly what you're asking with that first question. But, yep. Other than that, move on. What's the next one? Come on, throw it at me.
Yeah. So, one from Chaos Raven 97, which I think we've gone through before. I think I've asked it on the previous live stream, but let's just do it. So, will an advanced Earth-based faction come into play in later editions with a vengeance? Like, I think you said you wanted to keep it a mystery, but I just want to make sure that I didn't
Maybe,
remember it
maybe not.
correctly.
Who's to say?
Okay, so just leave it that.
Zach Kilgore said that the first one, the first question that he did ask was a meme, so like it was just a joke.
Okay.
Okay, fair enough. I think that's all I can see. Do you have anything else that we missed?
Let me just.
There is a question from Nightlock, which is is Wraith and Blood tasted to crypta, or is it vomit-inducing? Basically, can they feed on them?
So I did go over this a long time ago as well. When I was first working on the conceptualization of writing, I kind of I don't think that was on a stream. I think that was just a private conversation. So I guess this is the first time I'm discussing it in a proper context. So the Rathan blood, tongue-tied. So the Sovereignty actually have captured and do actively capture Rathan for blood, as a blood, not a substitute, but an inclusion onto their harvest worlds. But Rathan blood is like an alcohol. It has a drunkening effect. It doesn't satisfy any thirst. If anything, it enhances it. It makes you thirstier for blood. They don't know why, but this was first discovered after some human substitutions was tested, and one of them was a captured set of Rathan. After harvesting them for blood and testing them the old-fashioned way, just drinking it, it was intoxicating. It made them drunk. It made them disoriented. It's actually one of the few things that actually get to them like an alcohol anymore. Because old-fashioned alcohol isn't exactly A, prevalent, and B, effective, even if it was. So their closest bit to alcohol, like truly effective alcohol in the Sovereignty, is Rathan blood. So they actually do actively try and capture them for that end. But they're not... it's not a sustenance as much as it is a luxury item.
So
Kind of like beer.
So what you're saying is that the Empress might have a few Rathan stashed somewhere for recreational activities, let's say.
No, because that would imply the Rathan blood is that high quality. It's it's very easy to come by for them, and for one, and for two, it's kind of think of it as basically like beer. It's like low. It's the only alcohol that works for them, so by default everyone drinks it to a degree. But it's low. It's hard to explain. It's kind of like it's considered low ball, or like,
Yeah, it's like a cheap vodka. You drink it to get drunk and nothing else.
pretty much, and it's there for intoxication purposes. It's not refined. It's not delicious. It's not even really loved by those who drink it as much as it is, again, this is how we can actually get fucking drunk.
So the Warglaive equivalent of Budweiser, then.
I guess if you consider that like a cheap booze, it's basically the same idea.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Mind if I pick up the next question?
Yeah, go for it.
Unless you've got another one lined up yourself.
No, I was just about to say I apologize to all that's listening, because me and Nathan might be getting a bit too okay-ish. Just okay. So I will try to diversify my responses to Asmogun's answers. Just to say
Now, like I said before, if I sound a bit downtrodden, I'm just making sure that that's like a done deal. Like, the question's over, let's move on to the next one. You know, don't worry, I'm just I'm not losing interest. I am very hyped about this.
Awesome.
Yep.
So, a question coming in from, once again, Uros Osium, asking, considering the, quote, love everyone has for each other, are there any species that would be willing to splice genetics to make mutant/hybrid soldiers?
The sovereignty in the answer is no in the context of like mutual, like a partnership or like working in tandem with one another. The sovereignty, however, do actively collect new. Like, they are obsessed with both eugenics and with genetic enhancement and manipulation. That is their bread and butter. That is the Empress's bread and butter in particular. It's her obsession. And though you could argue that the Hellsings should be viewed as kind of like another step in their evolutionary chain, lots of crypta don't see it that way. They see the Hellsings as definitely superior to them, but only in the sense of like combat. They're seen as, both from the Hellsings' own perspective of themselves and how the crypta see them as a whole. They are just crypta, but bred specifically for fighting. They're like specialized, but the idea of a Hellsing like retiring and becoming a seamstress or a janitor is unheard of. They either die fighting or they win fighting. That's their entire existence and their purpose. As for the desire, though, to further enhance and in a sense perfect what the crypta are is a never-ending goal for the Empress. Though the core influence of their continued territorial expansion is for blood from their human enemies and also from the Rathan and alcohol, but the core motivator for her and for a lot of the nobility of the sovereignty is also the intention of finding new technologies that can enhance their genetics and new genetic samples that they can add to their own to further, again, perfect themselves. That is an obsession. But again, there's no diplomacy to it. I would say if the Empress herself was involved in the conversation and that was on the table, that would entice her more than anything else. But even then, the idea, even for her, for any crypta, to, in their eyes, bend the knee in any sense is far more disgraceful and would make them unworthy of that new genetic enhancement. So, there's no diplomacy for it. As for the Terran Republic, they are obsessed with technology. They like to advance their technology, they like to advance their weaponry and get bigger and bigger guns, more powerful guns. They don't like the genetic stuff at all. Like, some basic stuff, like Stimpaks and basically the version of steroids with less of the negatives. That's for sure, but in terms of like full-blown doing what the sovereignty does with rewriting the human genetic code and genome, they hate the concept of it. So they would rather just make a bigger mech. So that's the Terran Republic's stance on that. So that wouldn't even be enticing to them in a potential trade-off. The Warborn don't really care for that. The technological advancements with the Warborn have always been driven by their desire to make more effective weapons, to make them, to give them the ability to fight more worthy opponents than just themselves on their own planets. That's always been what's driven their technological advancements, is the desire to expand their territories as their population increased, but also to seek out more worthy opponents that the gods have handcrafted for them to face in the ultimate song and dance of warfare. That's what drives them forward. But enhancing themselves artificially genetically, they aren't opposed to it, nor are they for it. It's a foreign idea to them. they have medicine. They definitely have a very strong grasp of medical science, to a degree. But the spiritual influences on like the way they view genetics and the way they view their bodies and the way they view biology, it's just left them with no concept of the idea of being able to manipulate such a thing. The gods made you how you are, and yes, the gods also gave us the knowledge to heal ourselves and to repair grievous wounds, but that was only so our current selves could be allowed to re-enter the fray for one last chance at glory. If they completely clone me or not even clone me, but just change my skeletal structure and expand my muscular density and increase the thickness of my epidermal layer of my skin, all of these things to them would come off as a waste of resources at best and a potential insult to their gods at worst. So the Warborn wouldn't be enticed by it, but they wouldn't be as opposed to it as the Terran Republic. It'd be more like, this is not a thing we understand, nor want to.
Is fair.
And as for Xenos races, the Volk don't particularly... They've already genetically enhanced themselves so much, and their technology's advanced so much that they're less interested in such things, so it wouldn't... And also, like I said, they tend to keep to themselves a little bit more. They're still in an active war with any faction that enters their space, and with the Gretsch in particular. But there's no genetic cross that they would be okay with, and nor would any of the human factions be down for that. And the Gretsch don't negotiate.
Yeah, I don't think anyone would like to mix up with the Gretsch.
No, you wouldn't.
That makes a lot of sense.
A very mentally deranged Sovereignty Hyde might be thinking something like that, but he's in the minority.
Yeah, there are always some people like that, but anyways. Okay, so let's just moving on. A question from Murderous Kitten then. How would the Space Navy play out, and have you taken any inspiration from Navy history about the doctrines or anything like that?
I've taken inspiration from my own experience working for the United States Navy and being familiar with modern terminology and modern concepts with naval battles and naval design. I think this is where that stuff is a little bit more my bread and butter, just conceptualizing and adapting into a sci-fi setting. But as for like historical, there is some historical influence as well. I'd say I won't give too many specifics though. The historical influences range quite a bit, so if I gave one specific example, I think I'd give the wrong impression that that's like a core influence. I've taken more than anything, I've taken just my own direct experience working for the Navy and my own experience learning stuff through that to affect the naval stuff, less from history. The historical influences are just also to enhance my modern understanding, if that makes sense. As for the first part of the question, how will the Navy play out? There's a variety of answers to that question. Generally, it depends on the layout of the fight. So let's say a warborn fleet enters the same space. Let's say they have 3 Fenrir-class destroyers. They enter the same space as a Sovereignty, who have... what's a good example? They have quite a few ships. Let's say they go up against a small fleet of gargoyle-class carriers amongst the Sovereignty. That kind of fight would usually play out with the Warborn engaging directly in battle. The Warborn tactic is if they believe their armor can withstand the rain, withstand it. They design the front of their ships with the equivalent of a small, basically a meteor-sized battering ram at the front of their ship, and they will engage their propulsion engines at absolute max and attempt to bow in and essentially, depending on the size of the ship, potentially destroy the vessel that they're engaging in battle with a direct impact. Though that does present the risk of them also damaging their own hull significantly. They'd also charge into that attack, firing all their cannons and their weapons at the enemy. As for if they couldn't do that, or they couldn't get away with that, there'd be quite a bit. There's front, side, and aft weapons for pretty much every major capital vessel for every species. During battle, they would engage in lop fire back and forth and exchange it back and forth as they slowly maneuvered around each other. Again, each faction would operate this under different understanding and different tactics. Like, for example, the Rathan on their raid barges are extremely slow, but what they'll do is if they get right next to an enemy vessel, they will lurch out, basically like these scythe-looking blades, which are just made from scrap metal, and they'll hook into the enemy's hull. And if the enemy is capable of preventing those hull breaches from completely airing out their vessel, the Rathan will then travel through the openings that those giant scythes essentially made.
Acquired.
Oh, thank you so much, Lee. That is super generous of you, man. Thank you. I don't do the Patreon or things like that, but here is my monthly donation to see the success of Warglaive. Cheers. Well, I much appreciate that, man, and can't wait for the D&D game later. Pierce told you we're starting later, right? Because he's got work. But we get to go for longer because he's also off for the afternoon. But where was I?
Rathan charging in the...
Yeah. Rathan lurching with those scythes. That's a tactic they'll use. Again, the direct hammering with the Warborn is a tactic. The Sovereignty, their tactics are more traditional space battle, I guess I would say it. They fire as many weapons as they possibly can at the enemy. They launch fighter vessels to do what would be the terminology for that? To pepper, I guess, the enemy with small arms fire, and potentially also target more soft spots that aren't easily accessible or easily shot at from their capital vessels. They don't have really any melee or quote-unquote naval melee attacks. They don't do the hooks like the Rathan. They don't charge in and ram the other vessel like the Warborn. They typically fire from afar, walloping just as much overlapping fire as they can at the enemy until their shielding breaks and they destroy their vessel, or the enemy retreats and they can pursue them, with the exception of fighters being their only close-range attacks during that type of engagement. There's quite a bit of variety amongst how each faction approaches space combat, is what I'm trying to get across. So there's a lot of variety to go through answering that question. So I guess I'll leave it there because I don't want to take too much longer on just that one question. But that's like the general idea.
Okay. So basically, you have swarm tactics, you have rams, you have warding actions, and all the other things that come with.
Yes.
Okay then. Also, I would like to apologize again for my mispronunciation of your every term. I just need to sit down and remember them for once and for all. Because I called the rat Nathan again. Okay, so Nathan, would you like to go for next one then?
The next one should be another quick one from Mr. Gavin Isaacs himself. Are any factions more focused around water?
I guess it depends on what you mean.
Or actually, maybe
You mean like
a
aquatic?
I was going to say maybe a bigger question would be, will we see? Obviously, we go on about the Navy and also the Space Navy, you know, but will we actually see naval combat, like liquid water-based combat?
Yes.
Oh, a new dimension.
I would say that's
Suck
that's
it.
an old dimension.
Suck it, 40k. You ain't got
Actually, it's funny that you mentioned that. I was actually planning on revealing that much later, but it's not like a well-kept secret, I guess. I'm holding on to. Yeah, one thing I wanted to explore that I think sci-fi never does is sci-fi likes to just focus on the sci-fi elements and the old school stuff they leave in the dust. But for me, I also want to explain, okay, what happened to the old school ways of fighting. Now, obviously, even sci-fi and grimdark will go over like infantry battles, mechs, artillery, and stuff on land battles. But what about naval? There is naval combat for each faction. As the Rathan technique is typically to crash land their planet, they'll use this. Crash land their ship on a planet. They'll use the scrap from their, as I implied in the previous Q&A, with how they attacked the Terran Republic in their very first Xenos human engagement in this galaxy. That's pretty much how they operate every battle. Like, they'll crash land their raid barge, and with whatever scrap they can heap together from their destroyed ship, they'll make their initial weapons of war. And they do it very quickly. They're very efficient and oddly good at it. And that the vehicles include artillery, they include aquatic vehicles, things like could resemble a Humvee, subterranean vehicles with drills. They typically, if they crash land a raid barge, it's not going to be a one-day thing, and it might be if the colony is particularly weak, but they are rather than crash land with the full intention of not leaving and not even trying to leave until they've completely killed everyone and taken all their shit or captured them and done the worst that they could. But, yeah, naval combat is still an active thing. As for the tabletop, I thinking I could work that in there. In the main game, too, not in, like, a separate, like, side game. But it might end up having to be a side game if it gets too complicated in relation. And if it's not as, actively sought out as, like, the other aspects of, like, just the standard ground battles. It might end up being a side game, but one thing I want to do is include that in, like, the core gameplay. Like, if people, like, make maps and, like, have an aquatic part of the map for, like, naval combat, that would be fun for me to add. But, in mind, that's not guaranteed, but it's something I want to at least be in the lore, is that, yes, there's still submarines, there's still battleships, cruisers, frigates, carriers, things like that on the water side of things.
Okay, so mental note. I will just add a mental note to keep an eye for any aquatic in the future. Just to remember that there was this question then.
Oh no. Fitting. Speaking of naval combat, our boy Arctic has joined the chat.
Yay.
Hello, Arctic.
Do you mind if I take the next question, or?
I know this is entirely off topic, but I just want to point this out. One of the most annoying things I think I heard from, like, new designers when I worked for the Navy is so port's left and starboard's right? Which side? Which end of the ship are you facing? What? Oh, I always wanted to smash my head in when newbie said that. It's like, that's why we even use the term port and starboard, not left and right, because it changes. If it's left and right, that changes depending on whether you're looking aft or forward. Whereas starboard is always starboard and port is always port. Depending on where you're facing, the orientation changes.
Yeah, some people do have difficulties orienting with orientation, with left and right and all the other things.
See, thank you, Arctic. Nobody gets my frustration with that. It's super annoying. It's like, oh, this is left and this is right. No! It's port and starboard. For a reason. Okay, next to that, what about deck 01 or deck 1? I'm confused. Ugh. Okay, the reason there's a 0 there is because of the elevation from the base deck. That's why.
Well, you might want to make a separate stream.
I know. I just when we brought it up, that also came back to mind.
Yeah, just funny
Hey,
too.
moving on.
Okay, so go for it, Nathan.
Another one from Zach Kilgore himself says, would the settings factions evolve culturally / technologically as the story progresses? As in, would interactions in war change how the warborn see themselves and the way they wage war?
The most simple answer I can give is yes. One thing is a lot of the books are going to take place throughout different periods in the overall history. The reunification war being the best example, that happened in comparison to where all the quote unquote modern age that everyone in Warglaive is living in currently, like the up to date, where is the modern day, is 300 years in the past from that, for example. And that particular war affected all the factions, not only in how they viewed themselves, but how they viewed their now new enemies. That definitely, for the example you provided, impacted the Warborn. Because the Warborn didn't believe that there were other humans out there. They didn't even... Yeah, they believed solely that they were the only ones left. In their history, they believed that the other two spears of the gods that shepherded their species into this new nirvana, the other two were taken in by the earth god and destroyed. They thought that they were corrupted and had been dragged down to their version of hell. So they thought that they were it. And so when they re-encountered the other two, they thought they were alien species. They didn't even bother scanning their vessels and just began fighting. Not that quickly, but it eventually led into a full-blown fight. Once they actually engaged them face-to-face in an actual boarding situation, again, don't want to spoil too much of the events of the Reunification War, but once they saw face-to-face what they were dealing with, and once they realized that these aren't just aliens that look similar to us, these are what we were, that influenced the Warborn culture immensely, because that meant a part of their mythology which they had always interpreted as absolute fact was wrong. And that did actually impact the events of the Reunification War, because amongst the Warborn themselves, there was dissension. Many were pissed at this idea and said, no, these are not other humans. These are whatever these are, they're just mimics of what we are. They're still aliens. No matter what they may say or claim, they're a disgrace on what the idea of what we've always believed. This is a trick by the Earth God. Some interpret it as, no, these are still the interpretation is still correct. They've risen from hell and now they're in their demonic forms. Whether they're in these large, hell-crafted mechanical beasts of the Terran Republic in their mechs, or these monstrous, large, what they consider archdemons, which is the Helsings of the sovereignty. And to be fair, the look of not only the Helsings but the crypta as a whole probably helped sell the idea that they were from hell. that really impacted their culture. It actually added a schism once where there was almost not quite unity, but there was like one general thing all Warborn agreed to. Now, after that, the events of the Reunification War have actually left a little bit of a schism in their culture, because there are still sects of their culture who believe the old religion is still 100% correct, and that these are risen demons from hell. And there are others who have come to the conclusion that their mythology and that their culture is flawed in some of its tellings. They still believe in the core tenets of their culture, but they now see their history as they've always thought it to be, as needing clarification. And there are some who actually seek it out. And to the other sect that still hold true to the old religion, those are heretics, I guess would be how they would put it. And they vehemently hate them. And then there are those who aren't sure which to follow under, but they continue to perform their duties as warriors in their culture and continue to fight and expand the Warborn's dominion. That's a very good example of how the events of this world's history have actually shaped their cultures. Again, hope that properly answered the question. Hope it didn't go too down a rabbit hole.
You do know, sounds like you wrapped it up quite well, though.
Yeah, I can say that as well.
Yeah, Zach Kilgore says very nice, so you've definitely answered it for them.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, so one question I came to mind for me then about the space battles. Have you thought of anything of like stealth related in regards to this?
Yep. The Volk in particular use a lot of stealth tech. I'll just leave it at that, I guess, because the thing is, I don't think I need to clarify that. Yes, there are stealth craft in Warglaive. There are ways to counter stealth craft in Warglaive. I think I can leave it at that. Like, that one doesn't need a tangent, right?
Yeah. I just wanted to ask because there was a question from Murderous Kitten. So, question: space submarines, and I think this answers quite well.
I'm gonna quickly run to the bathroom if everyone is okay with that. I shall return. Forgive me.
Fine. Okay, Nathan. So we are left entertaining the chat.
Clearly, I don't know. Do you want to? Here's an idea, right? Here's a bit of an experiment.
Yeah.
Praise Flugnog in the chat.
Yeah. Let's see how many praises we get.
Let's see how many praises we can get for Flugnog to confuse Asmogon.
Come on, praise Flugnock. Up. Let's see how many people remember Flugnock.
I don't think a lot of people were around for that stream, but
Yeah, just trust us and praise Flugnock.
just praise Flugnog. He will hear your praises.
Let me add my. Yep. Okay,
There
so
we go. Yeah, they're all coming in now.
2, 3, 4. Keep it going. Come on. We might bring him to existence if we keep that going. Yes. Also, hello, Karn of Corn and New Mechanicus Tech.
I have returned.
Praise Flugnog, indeed.
Yep. And we're just messing around praising Flugnog.
Holy Ogre site.
Mm-hmm.
Gotta get a t-shirt about that. Can't have an ogre on the t-shirt, that'd be copyright, but I gotta get a t-shirt just Flugnog.
We'll figure something out.
May I just say that Flugnog is very good. As well, if anybody gets that reference.
Okay.
Okay, moving on. Alright.
Yeah.
Questions.
Yep, next one then. There's one from Zach Kilgore. Is the Terran Republic a genuine republic, or are they autocratic government that masquerade as a republic?
I kind of went over that in the previous Q&A, but to recap
Oh, so
simply, they are a republic in name only. They do quote-unquote vote in their officials, but it's all a game. There's very little people running for office. And their culture has been intentionally raised up as this ultra-militaristic society. Like, everybody's in the military at least for 6 years once they turn 16. So, yeah, they don't... the officials that have been in office will always be in office until they die, pretty much. Because they're considered the military minds that have led them through the darkest times in their history that, you know, that they've lived through. So they will always win the quote-unquote vote. And even if they weren't winning a vote in a particular year, mysteriously, they would. Anyway, even if they were not as popular as the previous years. It's all really for show.
Yeah, so let's just say go check the other Q&A and yeah, leave a like. Leave a like, subscribe, as the YouTubers say.
Helps the YouTube algorithm to give a shit.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I went over it in more detail there. I did a full spiel about it there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the next question was from Mr. MD Survivalist. And it would be, what are battle casualty rates, besides from the Terran Republic? He says that, I know their pride require them to serve more than 6. Are their terms of service linked for regular humans?
Well, first thing to clear up about the Terran Republic, they're the only ones that would really fit the definition of regular humans, because they're the least genetically influenced over the years. But in terms of casualty rates, the highest casualties would be the Terran Republic, because they're sandwiched on two sides of the other two human factions, which all are trying to kill each other. On top of that, they also are constantly... They in particular are constantly hounded by the Rathan, who are extremely prolific in their space, and they've done their absolute best to hunt them down with their specific fleets designated for that task. But with their space, their particular territory being as big as the sovereignties, with a lot of planets in their system, in their systems, yeah, it's not impossible, but it's incredibly difficult to try. Even with as slow moving as the Rathan are, they're experts at either fending off the Terran Republic's attempts to exterminate them, or just avoid detection through very skeezy manners. But I would say, outside of that, the standard casualty rates across all the factions is massive. If someone were in like a higher position of any of the factions, would probably describe it, just for brevity, as innumerable. The losses are extensive. Part of what keeps each faction fighting is a sense of revenge. They wanna get revenge and what they see as justice for the losses and the pains that they've suffered at others. Less so on the Sovereignty and Warborn's end, but I guess there is that to a degree for both. But less so for the two of them. The Sovereignty are more driven forward by their desire for more blood and blood sources. The Terran Republic they are really wanting to exterminate both the Sovereignty and the Warborn. More so the Sovereignty, but the Warborn are still a massive issue. They really don't like them. I'd say I don't have a specific number. I'd say the attrition that every faction suffers, especially amongst the human factions, It's a any if we tried to go smaller scale and just said what would like the common losses be in a ground battle between the Sovereignty and the Warborn, both would probably lose hundreds of thousands if the campaign lasted more than a week. We're talking millions if the conflict's spread across multiple planets in the same system and naval conflict. Billions if it included more than just the two factions, especially if the Gretsch are involved. Yeah, it's hard to give a definitive answer to that. It depends entirely on the scenario. But generally, their losses are in the billions every year. In any general given war front for any of the factions. The only exception being the Volk are probably a little bit higher than that, because they're though they've stemmed the tide of the Gretsch in their territory, the cost at which it is taken to hold the Gretsch from gaining any new ground in their territory costs them a lot of their species every year, every solar year. So across every faction, if you want to, the number would well be on the tens of trillions, if not hundreds of trillions, across every faction altogether on a solar year.
Yay. Let's see. Anything in specific you wanna ask, Nathan? Any question that got your interest, or?
I would just like to say thank you to Oro Socium, who has actually said in the Discord that he is just hopping off for tonight because he's drifting in and out. But
Okay, so-
he did stick around to a lot of the Q&A, asking a lot of questions. So
which I appreciate. Thank you.
very good contributions.
Yeah, have a
Yeah,
good
I
night,
would.
man.
Yeah, same. I would also like to say that if anyone feels like we missed some question, or maybe some question wasn't asked, I will keep a list. I will go around and check the questions again, and I'll keep the list for any potential other streams. And if you want to go and check the other Q&A, maybe there are some answers in there, if I've missed anything. So yeah, I'll just keep it in mind if anyone missed anything.
Yeah. So, Nightlock asks, or he says, I have a very inappropriate question that will get me banned off YouTube. Oh, actually, wait, yeah. Putting this carefully as I can be, can female Rathans mate like the rest of their species, or no?
But I guess it depends on the exact meaning. They can mate. They do. If you're asking if like a male human could potentially impregnate a female Rathan, the answer is yes. But like with the males, the offspring would be virtually all Rathan. With minor, and we're talking like hair color at best, and that's if you're really got some dominant genes, would influence the offspring. One key difference between the males impregnating female humans, for example, Rathan females are biologically designed to actually have Rathan infants. So when they actually give birth, they're not at risk of being eaten. Or because you know, they just plop them out, they're fine. It feels so inappropriate to put it that way, but we are talking about a pretty inappropriate faction. Thank you, New Mechanics Tech, for the super chat, man. Thank you. Donate $1.49. Peach emoji.
Yeah, it's a rat peach right there.
It's just weird, but yeah. Short answer: yes, they are capable of copulating with non-Rathans. Same deal applies to them, though. The offspring is
Resources
still around.
acquired.
Okay. Okay, let's see then. There are actually Gavin Isaacs. I'm sorry, I kind of missed your question. He asked a few questions relating to psychers and psychics and the universe. So let's see. He asked who is the greatest psyker and which is the most psychically focused race.
The greatest psyker, the greatest psychic in, or augur, as they're referred to in lore. I made that mistake in the previous Q&A. My apologies, by the way. Augurs are the term most factions use for their psychically inclined. The most powerful augur in the human factions is the Empress of the Sovereignty. She's a tier 6, which is the most high up tier you can be. Like, we're talking, you can, with your mind, without even focusing that hard, can manipulate the flow of blood in someone's veins. Like, you could, like, stop the flow, let it go, stop the flow, in all of their veins simultaneously, and pull out their blood from their body. Without moving, without really thinking about it too much, just like a reflex. You can crush small craft with your mind. You can read everybody's thoughts in a room and break them down in a matter of seconds of what everyone was thinking. You can control entire swaths of warriors from a completely different faction by completely dominating them with your psychic will. She is the most powerful augur known to the humans. The Volk generally are the most psychic race. They are all augurs, universally. That's how they communicate with each other, is through a psychic link. It's not like the Kala for the Protoss, or like the Hive Mind for any insect race in sci-fi. It's not, it's directly one-to-one. It's not like a connected mind they all have. It's, I'm sending this other Volk my specific thoughts, and they're sending them back. You can have private conversations. But they are capable of reading and other people's minds and blocking them out, and it saves them a lot of aggravation, and that's actually part of how efficient they are in terms of their technology, in terms of how they fight in battle. Their psychic communication, they are able to convey intention, ideas, strategy. They can convey an entire battle plan to their entire squad of Volk soldiers instantaneously. Like, you could be fighting a Volk melee to melee, and with literally no signs at all, they will jump away from the fight and immediately start retreating as all of them retreat instantaneously, and then a bomb will drop on your location as their artillery cannons are firing plasma artillery at you. And it all happened in a matter of seconds. There was no sound off, there was no signal, there was no hand waves, there was nothing. They all just instantly started retreating. And there was no gap between you engaging them in melee combat and them retreating, because they just communicated instantly. Now, the Volk do, in a weird way, struggle to read human minds. They can read our minds, but in their own terminology, the human mind is too simplistic and chaotic to fully read. So, whether you're Crypta, Warborn, or Terran, they have a hard time reading humans' brains. It's not hard, it's not impossible, it is hard. It's not impossible, though. It's just confusing. Like, to them, it's the mental equivalent of trying to unravel like 80 different like wired cords that have all been wrapped together in this big jumbled mess. To them, it just doesn't make sense. There's no flow to it. There's no sense to it. There's no order. We have so much emotions influencing us. We have so many personal concepts we're breaking through. So many fears, so many doubts, so many emotions we want to do individually. And it's all so scrambled that, to them, learning our battle strategies like as they fight us, is actually harder than just engaging us with their own strategies and not trying to just read our minds and know what we're doing. Essentially, our lack of streamlining mentally is our only great defense against the Volk. Because we confuse the fuck out of them.
So they're basically telepaths.
Yeah.
In that case.
And they also have telekinetic abilities. They have particular... They have the largest number of tier 5 augurs, which are the only ones outside of tier 6s that can lift full-blown objects and throw them at people. And can, like, stop tanks or, like, crush somebody's body into a paste from a distance. Forlorn Lancer. Any creepy supernatural phenomena... also, thank you for the super chat, man. Thank you. Any creepy supernatural phenomena that goes on in the void of space. Also managed to find some models with flight jackets. Yes! I'm glad you could find those flight jackets. Was it in the World War II sets I recommended? If so, I'll be so happy. If not, I get it. But either way, I'm happy you found them. As for creepy supernatural phenomenon, there is oddities out in the galaxy, mythologies and belief that there's a boogeyman in space and this, that, and the other, and particularly around the Gretsch and what the hell is going on in their space, especially the speculation of what goes on in their core worlds. One of the only, like, is the term parasocial? I don't know if that's the term. The only kind, in air quotes, thing the Volk have ever done is they actually, once they learned how expansive the human races had become in the galaxy, right after the reunification war, you could argue the reunification war between humanity is still going on, but when it was in its full swing, initially, that's when the Volk took notice of us during their ever ongoing conflict with the Gretsch. It wasn't our first contact with them. It was actually later than that. But once they realized the significant reach that humanity had in our 3 factions, they actually sent a psychic link to all of the faction leaders of the memory of their queen who had sent the armada to attack the Gretsch in their space. And everything that happened, including up to the point where the last thing that they heard was Nauru, and then all telemetry ending. The reason the Volk did this is not explicitly known. It is known that their current queen ordered it. It's one of the few orders the queen has given, because the Volk have a council that mainly operate their entire society, of all the elders of their different castes. The queen is more of an arbiter of law. She's not really, like, do this. She's not active. She's just there, like, if there's a decision that needs to be made and there's a tie, she'll be like, I choose this side for this reason, and then the Volk act on it. And again, all of this isn't like long drawn out arguments that happen in like a human senate or like Congress. These quote unquote psychic conversations happen in seconds. It's like this side thinks this way, this side thinks this. They don't agree. Queen, arbitration. I choose this side. Boom. All that happened in like a second. Volk are very efficient. And if the Gretsch weren't a thing, they would be controlling the entire galaxy.
So it is fair to say that the Volk can communicate with other races as well, then?
Yes. They can send messages to the human mind very easily. Reading the human mind. I do need to clarify that. Reading the human mind, though, very confusing. Like, it's the same idea of, like, you can add another string onto, like, you can add another rubber band onto those rubber band balls that get, like, this fucking big. But it's not the same as taking all those rubber bands off to figure out which is the right rubber band you're looking for. Just to give, like, a visual of, like, how that works. How they can send a communication to a human mind, but not read a human mind very well. That's the general idea.
Hmm.
Like, here's another rubber band, but I have no idea how to unravel this son of a bitch.
Yeah, so basically they know what they're seeing, they just don't know what to do with it.
Kind of.
Alright, so okay, then we can move on then. Nathan, any questions you might wanna go for?
Yes, I have one backed up from Zach Kilgore, who asks, would there be constant bouts of war, or would there be periods of Cold War-like lulls in fighting, where the human factions will try things like espionage, subterfuge? It's like underhanded, not direct tactics.
The only example of that in the lore is there was a period called the Reunification Cold War. Now, what happened is after the first 80 years of conflict of the Reunification War between the free-for-all battle royale fight between each of the three human factions, there came a point where their casualties on each of their fronts was so massive and so unheard of for each of their factions that, and they were all, I will spoil this because I kind of have to answer the question. They were all also attacked by the Gretsch. During this time is when they first encountered them. And when the Gretsch attacked them, to fight them off, they all had to work together for a portion of time. So once they worked together to fend off the Gretsch, which was successful, barely, they then, in virtue of that, I guess, temporary alliance, also agreed that each of their casualties was so severe that they agreed to lull the fighting. The Warborn thought it would be dishonorable to continue fighting because their enemies were now weakened to the point, and themselves were weakened to the point where it wouldn't really be worthy of song, as a bunch of crippled, hurt individuals started just trying to hit each other with sticks with how little they could actually lift their weapons. And the visual was that they were just, everybody was so weakened it wouldn't be worthy of song, and there was no glory in fighting there was no glory in fighting a hound with its teeth plucked, was the idea. So the Warborn backed off. Additionally, the Sovereignty agreed because during this time their population hit a rather sharp decrease, so their supply for blood was also kind of unneeded. Well, not unneeded, but they had quite a bit of stockpile and not enough mouths to eat it up. So as long as the Warborn and the Terran Republic agreed to allow them to keep their salvage from war, in air quotes. In other words, the people from both factions that they had already kidnapped and were now siphoning for blood on their harvesting worlds. And the Terran Republic and Warborn not wanting to agree to this, but also, again, everybody was kind of weakened due to not only the conflict with each other, but with the Gretsch. Reluctantly agreed to it. The Terran Republic citizenry was not made aware that that was the agreement, to allow their people to continue to be fed upon in these harvest worlds. They were told they were all dead. That everybody that the Sovereignty had captured had died. And that none of them were on harvest worlds. That didn't become common knowledge until after the core reunification conflict. And even when it became public, it wasn't allowed to be revealed that the higher-ups in the Terran Republic military and government knew that there were harvesting worlds. It's like, oh, there's harvesting. Oh, God. Who'd have thunk? I mean, yeah, jeez. I thought they just killed all their prisoners. I don't know. You know, that kind of feign ignorance crap. The game of bureaucracy. But yeah, the Terran Republic higher-ups agreed to the temporary stalemate as well. The Warborn saw those who had been captured as too weak to be worthy of rescue if they were so pitiful that they didn't even die in battle. So they were kind of indifferent about that particular aspect. They were a little pissed that was happening, but at the same time, wasn't really worth the fight at that point.
Then,
But yeah, to answer the question, after all that shit happened, there was a 40-year Cold War, which for the Sovereignty was a blink of the eye, and for the Terran Republic and the Warborn, so much happened during that quote-unquote Cold War that when it finally reignited into a proper conflict again, it didn't really feel like the conflict even really ended. It just got a lot quieter. But other than that, there aren't really any Cold Wars. Everything else is more open warfare at the moment.
okay.
Yes,
You sound exhausted.
Zach Kilgore got his question answered then.
Mm-hmm.
Hope so.
Okay, so let's see, anything else? Checking the list again. The thing is, I kind of forgot where we were of it. I need to try to read it up again.
I can ask another question if you want in the meantime.
Yeah, just go for it.
So this question was inspired by somebody in the chat who was just memeing, saying, will there be anybody we can blame like Lorgar? But the question that I was going to ask was, so the just a bit of a memey one, but do you know like the Imperial Guard has Sly Marbo?
Yes.
Does the Terran Republic have their own equivalent?
They have
of this mythical figure.
They do have a few, actually.
Oh.
They one thing to help keep the troops back home coming more voluntarily as opposed to just the draft is also the idea of war glory and of mighty heroes fighting against the dastardly evil sovereignty and the savage, brutish, lughead warborn and the evil, sinister, maniacal Xenos of all breeds and sizes. A man fighting against such amazing odds and yet still coming out on top. Yeah, there's a few.
And will these characters be constantly screaming?
To be honest, none that I have intentionally pictured like that, but I could see that kind of being a meme for one of them, maybe.
Okay. So hopefully that's given a Tangela enough time to
Yeah, I think I have one which is kind of interesting for me as well. From I kind of combined two questions from Chaos Raven 97, which is seeing that the sovereignty is kind of vampire inspired, let's say. Is there any analogy to the thralls and the undead that are basically their victims drained from blood, used for anything or something like that?
Other than the occasional mutation amongst their own culture with blood clotters, using them as like giant abomination monstrosities of vampiric mutation, no. Not that hardcore into the influence.
Yeah, so no zombies, Frankenstein monsters then?
No. Not exactly like that.
Okay, so I hope that answers the question then.
Hopefully.
Hopefully, yes. Okay, anything else?
As for the earlier thing Nathan said, though, about, like, is there, like, a blame Lorgar thing? I don't think it's my job as the writer to tell you who to blame. I feel like it's not like the writer for, like, the writers, the numerous ones, for Black Library told everybody to blame Lorgar. Now, that just became a community decision after reading the lore. I'll allow you guys to come up with who to blame for what.
I mean, not to go on too much of a tangent, but yeah, I can agree to that because we can just take Abaddon, or as we say, Failbadon, and see how they tried to push it and how it all came up in the end. So yeah, it should be, no, it will be our prerequisite to figure out who to blame and who to hate, I
Indeed.
think. Okay. Oh, and one more from Arctic Ant, if you don't mind, Nathan.
Yeah, that's fine.
Arctic Hand is asking, with the we said that you are planning on doing physical copies for the lore books. Do you plan the same for any rule books that you might
Well,
produce?
to clarify something, the purchasable rulebooks slash codexes, which my codexes aren't called that, they're called archives, in reference to the codex style information and data sheets and all that, and some fluff stuff for their factions. Those would be optional. I'm gonna have all the data sheets and the core rules all available in free PDFs. It's just the raw rules and just the raw data sheets, but the it looking in an interesting form and having like the extra lore fluff that like codexes do for 40k or archives will for Warglaive, all of that will be in the books. The needed information to play the game will be free. But if you want to buy the archives as collectibles, as like, you know, like, hey, like, oh, this is all the editions of Warglaive I played over the years. You know, if you want that, I'll sell hardcovers of that stuff. And it'll have, you know, it'll be nice, hopefully nicely laid out, decorative, and have a lot of the core fluff of what you need to know about this particular faction or sub-faction. It'll have the data sheets. It'll have it'll have the stuff you need to play, and it'll have some of the extras. The extras and again, having it as like, this is like me. This is a tome of my time playing first edition Warglaive. I kind of want that feel, but at the same time, I don't want you guys to have to buy them to play the damn game. Especially if like there's a major imbalance, and now you got the data sheets or something in the core rulebook is a little off, and I fix it mid game. I'll just put up on probably my website the fix, like, oh, sorry about that, this rule was a bit off, and I will to my absolute best make the first edition as solid as possible. I don't want to have to do like those FAQ fixes, but if I do have to do that, the FAQ fix will just be another free PDF as well. Like, I don't, like I said, I don't want people to have to buy this. As much as it might be a dumb business move, I don't want you guys to have to buy these things. Like, I want you guys to want to buy them. I want you guys to want to collect the archives and want to collect the minis and want to collect these things.
Well, yeah, that's fair. Speaking from just me, just how I am, I would like to have pretty much everything in book form that comes out, because it's just, I love collecting books even if I don't play the game. So I might end up just buying the archives just to have them on my shelf, even if I don't get any minis or stuff like that, even if I don't play the game, just because I like the stuff.
Yeah,
So,
that's another perfectly reasonable, sound reason to buy them. Like, you just want to collect them.
yeah. And maybe if I have any friends that are interested in there, maybe in the future, maybe I find somewhere to play with. Or if I'm too old, my kids then.
Daddy, what's this?
I mean,
This is a really cool game made by a guy who is incredibly weird, but he made a good game. Let's play.
So like you, Daddy, huh? Yeah. Okay. Let's not go there.
That shameless plug. The shilling. But yeah, I think it goes without saying that move is very community oriented. The fact that obviously there will be people that will collect the books, and just for the sake of collection. But in terms of trying to keep the entire game and community together, that would be absolutely invaluable. Because the thing is, you could only release the archives in book form, but there'd be no point. Some people don't have the money to spend, but they'd still be willing to play the tabletop. So yeah, that'd be very beneficial to the wider audience.
Yeah. Just got a really strong sense of deja vu all of a sudden.
A question from Zach Kilgo. If you'd mind taking it.
Sure.
Is Warglaive fantasy a possibility?
Is it a possibility?
Yes.
Yes. Am I going to do it immediately? No. Warglaive fantasy would require a lot of work, and as it is, I'm already. I personally, when it comes to my taste, I'm bigger into sci-fi than I am fantasy. But if I were to do Warglaive fantasy, which part of me wants to, I would definitely need to have Warglaive Gothic itself be successful first. Like, I don't know how soon after like the initial stuff with the Warglaive Gothic I would be getting off the ground before I could dedicate time to start developing a whole other version of the universe. But what I would say is, if everything works out hopefully well with Warglaive, standard Warglaive fantasy would be fun to do. For the hell of it, I might hire on another head writer just for that. Like, let somebody else who's a bigger fantasy nerd than I'll ever be write that shit.
You can diversify later when
I have the budget, the time, and hopefully the staff.
Indeed.
Tanja, have you got another question to throw out?
Any other question?
If not, I've got another one.
Yeah, go for it. I'm kind of blanking out.
No worries. Okay, so another question. This is a bit of related to the large space the space creature one that I had, that was asked before, but more so just individual people. Like, will there be these uber powerful, like, not god tier, but like very, very strong singular characters within the lore that are aligned to nobody? They just exist. Like, you would need armies to take these single people or single creatures or people down.
Yes. I will avoid elaborating further.
Oh.
I think we're getting closer to other topics that we kind of asked before, so I'm not gonna ask anything either on that as well.
I'll take one more question, by the way. I do need to get ready for my D&D campaign, which I'm also streaming, so.
Yeah. Well, I had a question, but I kind of forgot just said that, so I'm gonna leave it at that.
All right.
Anything else that you want to ask, Nathan? Any other questions we've missed or you want to bring up?
I'm just quickly skimming through the chat, just no, I think that's really it for the chat.
Yeah. let's just say if anyone has any questions that we missed or kind of forgot about, maybe just keep them for the next one, or again check the Q&A before that, or this Q&A if you joined us later. Just because
One thing I am spotting is earlier Gavin asked, can the Volk read the Gretsch or the Rathen? I'll treat that as the last question.
I actually did ask about the other races, but you can elaborate on that as well.
Right,
Go for it.
Can the Volk read the Gretsch and the Rathen? The Volk can read the Rathen, with the exception of Rith. Rith has engaged with the Volk so much, he's actually learned to, in a weird way, code his mind. He just recites the old stories and memories in his mind the moment he feels the touch of the Volk's mind in his, when they're trying to read his thoughts. If they're just going into his mind to hear him communicate back and forth with them when they're like doing trade goods, because he actually trades with the Volk a lot. But if he feels them going deeper into his mind, he actually has developed, in his years of working with them is a strong term, in his years of dealing with them, he's learned to, in a way, code his mind, hardwire it away from them being able to dig deeper. He basically intentionally tangles it. But generally, Rathaner have a very simplistic mind. So, whereas humans have so many memories, we have so many emotions, so many experiences, so many thoughts, so many complicated rhythms in our heads that are so raveled that they have a hard time understanding it, because when they're communicating with each other, they have no such complications. They don't even really have filters with how they feel about things. If a Volk is pissed about something, it comes off. If they're happy about something, it comes off. They're just blunt as hell because there's no sense of subtlety with that. It's just, this is the raw intention I'm communicating. And Rathen, they are very simplistic creatures. They are very instinct-driven. And what little thought process they have is really just, well, how can I underhandedly fuck over this person? So, at most, when dealing with Rathen, the Volk just constantly hear or feel their thoughts are generally, how can I screw over this spider-looking fuck? And they're like, ugh, that's all they're thinking. As they're selling me goods. But, yeah, Rith being the exception, Rathen are pretty easy to read. As for the Gretsch, again, the Volk see them as the ultimate enemy for a reason. The Gretsch, they can't read at all. The psychic presence that the Gretsch as a whole give off affects their ability to communicate with each other as much as it affects their ability to read their minds. And even when they were successfully able to capture a particular kind of Gretsch, I won't spoil the kind, after attempting to read its mind, the shaman of their research cast on their homeworld of the Volk, their mind actually essentially was lobotomized, but they were, knowing that was a risk trying to delve into the subconscious of the Gretsch, they were essentially not, the term recording is a bit strong. They recorded the impressions of what they were interpreting from the Gretsch's mind into a particular kind of gemstone. It's kind of, think of it as like the Volk equivalent of like a USB stick. And he was recording that data at the risk of his own mind getting destroyed. And after delving into the Gretsch's mind, and he lobotomized himself, all that he was able to ascertain from delving into its mind is that the Gretsch, individually, they don't have a will. They don't have... Each Gretsch is not thinking. They don't even have instinct. They're like puppets on strings. They don't have what we would call a consciousness. They are sentient, they are alive, but they are not self-aware. They are not each individual of their kind is not thinking, what am I? They don't even think, what are we? There's no hive mind. There's nothing. In the Vok's own interpretation of what he was trying to interpret as he read its mind was, whereas a human's mind is a ever-raveling, ever-complicated mess of communication, thoughts, memories, indecision, regrets, all these other things that just heavily influence the ability to read it. The Gretsch is like an empty void, a black hole. It absorbs and it contracts and it takes in, but it gives nothing out. And to delve into that subconscious is asking for death, especially for augurs. You cannot read their mind because virtually they have none. And because they were delving into that subconscious, and as I said, it's like a black hole. It absorbs. It also absorbs your consciousness. And like a black hole, whatever it absorbs is destroyed. So the particular augur shaman amongst their research cast, the reason he was lobotomized is his consciousness was absorbed by the Gretsch's mind and eradicated. So the Gretsch, it's not just a matter of not being able to read them. It's not just a matter of there not being anything to read. What is there is indescribable.
It's quite mysterious, that is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it almost sounds like something from the Twilight Zone, something like that. It is quite interesting.
I would say I've had a lot of inspiration when it came to working on the Gretsch. And I'd say out of all the factions, I consider them, in certain aspects, the most original faction in the lore. Again, in certain aspects. In some ways, people are easily going to see their inspirations, easily going to see where I was, at the very least, impressed upon for their ideas. But I would say they are the ones I had the most creative outlet with, and very little of their internal writing. I looked at other things. It was just what I looked at, like the basic concepts and ideas for sure and other things, and then I kind of elaborated on them and expanded upon them into what the Gretsch are. I would say that the closest to eldritch horror will be the Gretsch. But they're also horrific in the traditional ways as well.
I was gonna say, I think I remember asking a question like this the last Q&A, where, what sort of could we expect any Lovecraftian cosmic horror elements? Is the Gretsch possibly going to be?
They are the closest to that.
Okay, so the Gretsch are probably going to be the faction I'm going to watch out most for, because I really want to see some Lovecraft-based
Indeed.
creatures.
Excited for you guys to learn more about all of them. But we're going to have to call it there. I got to get ready for the D&D game, rest up my voice at least a little bit, and yeah, I got to get the tripod and everything set up for that. So thank you guys for being representatives of the community and running the Q&A. You guys are great. Thank you to everybody who donated and everybody who was super generous, and thank you to everybody who asked questions. It helps me. It helps keep me motivated to see so many people interested in seeing more and more and more and more being elaborated upon. These Q&As really are a great drive to keep me moving forward. So, I appreciate it a lot, guys, and I can't wait to get this thing off the ground. I wish I could speed things along, but at the same time, I don't want to affect quality by rushing anything. So, at the same time,
23 viewers. 23 views was the highest that we had. 23 viewers was the height of the amount of people in chat.
Okay.
To the 25, so definitely in comparison, a lot of people very interested in this.
Yeah, and I'm excited I'm excited that those people are excited, or at the very least interested. Anyway, Gotta go, guys. Thanks a lot. I'll catch you guys next time. And if anyone has questions, send them the way the Q&A or the FAQ page. Have a good one, guys.